have on occasion moved things around in an agenda. And I think from a practical standpoint, it's pretty hard to deal with these two matters, particularly Mr. Keene's matter, without having our planner here. Because any of the questions are supposed to be directed to the planner, not to council. And how do you do that if he's not here? So I would find it a very futile effort to try and proceed without him. So I'm certainly not making a motion that we, wait around for him or whatever. We can get on to things when he comes. I guess the clerk can let us know and our CAO can let us know, and I guess we can then go into the committee of whole and do it. So I'm not suggesting we change it all. So, thank you.
Okay, thanks. We are going to move ahead. That brings us to the consent agenda, item 7, which consists of council and committee meeting minutes for and there's just one, which is the regular council meeting of February 7th, our last regular meeting, and unfinished business, which is listed on your agenda. So could I'm just getting these things out of the way here. Could I get a mover and seconder for this? Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone does hereby approve the following council meeting minutes. The regular council meeting minutes of February 7th, 2023, and that council receives for information the unfinished business listing contained in the consent agenda dated February 21st, 2023. Councillor Ray moves, seconded by Councillor Woods. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate. And I guess there are no matters arising from the consent agenda. Is that correct? Okay. Next is item 8, accounts payable. I get a mover and seconder that the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone received for information the accounts payable listing in the amount of $375,502.18 for the period ending February 15th, 2023. That's moved by Councillor Lamb. Seconded by Councillor Woods. Is there any discussion? Questions?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I might.
Go ahead.
Nobody else has any questions. On page, gotta find it here. 30, or page 40. There's 2 invoices for John Jackson Planning Inc. And they just say general. It's line item 1160. One was for 3,900 and the other was for 2,065. I'm just wondering if staff can come back to us at a later date once they have the information. Let us know what those general planning matters were, if possible. And then on page, there's just a couple. I'll just go through them, but I'm not expecting an answer tonight. Page 30, I'm working backwards here, by the way. Page 39, item 1151. And then page 35, item 1127. And page 34, 1121. And page 33, 1123. If we can just get a report later on, that would be great on those. And the only question I had outside of that was, I noticed there was one item on page 40, item 1159, that was for air automotive tracking. And I'm just wondering, I'm not sure I'm assuming it says vehicle tracking. I'm just wondering, is that for our snow plows? Are we tracking all vehicles in the fleet, or is it just the snow plows? There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 vehicle tracking. So again, staff could just get back to us and let us know if that was for the snow plows, which I'm guessing it might be. That was all.
So we're gonna, the clerk is gonna answer those later. Presumably?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions or comments about the tables?
Yeah, just one, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, on the very first page, 36893 Hall Construction. 50% nurses station, 23,374. And I'm guessing that's for the paving out here, is that, am I correct at that? Okay, and when you say 50% nursing station, what's that mean? 50% of the costs are allocated to the nursing station.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what it means is that we were not pleased with the quality of the work at the end of the year. So we were holding back money.
Oh, okay, well, that's.
So we paid them 50% and there'll be some remediation work in the spring and then they'll get full
Yeah,
payment.
okay, sorry. I didn't expect that answer, so or I might not have asked it, I don't know, so anyway, thank you. I take it on, the other one is 1121 on page 34 of 78. Paul Gray Legal Services, $1,624. Is that for a case or is that for the trailer bylaw? Because I know that he reviewed the trailer bylaw that we're discussing tonight. You can just get back to me and let me know what that's for. It's got to be for either a pending case we have or that, I would think. Again, I keep seeing, and I won't go into each one, but and I guess David gave us an explanation, but everywhere I look, I keep seeing the Freightliner come up for repairs and costs, and I just see the Freightliner too many times. How old's the Freightliner? Is it an older truck or do we know? Don't know, okay. Yeah, I'm just concerned that you know, our fleet's pretty good, but when you start seeing Freightliner repairs, you know, new tires, new this, new that. I wonder how old it is and what we're doing. I'm also obviously cognizant that you know, we do get repairs and there are accidents that happen. So as long as they're controllable and not too many of them, right? But I know in the past, there's been a lot of damage done to our trucks. I don't think particularly now, but anyway, I am concerned, you know, for what it's worth on the Freightliner. As I think we discussed at the last meeting, there was a number of questions on that Freightliner. So I don't know whether David couldn't talk at some point about the history of the Freightliner and what the plans are with respect to it. Thank you. And I think that's all I have. Yep, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else on tables? Are you ready for the question then? All in favor? Okay, thank you. That's carried. That's received. So next is item 10, which is a bylaw relating to an item that was in the we'll have to do that later. That's in committee of the whole. Business matters, item 11. First item is extension of the Integrity Commissioner's Services Contract. Could I give Hoover and seconder, please, that the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone extend the contract with Airden Burles. John Mascarin is the Integrity Commissioner for the provision of integrity commissioner services until the end of February 2024. That's moved by Councillor Lamb, seconded by Councillor Bray this time, I guess. Any discussion?
Yeah, just.
Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, just by way of information, our last integrity commissioner resigned in the fall, and we appointed Mr. John Mascaron. So he's been with us about 6 months now, and I know he's working on some cases, I think. And he's done a pretty good job. He's in, every time I turn the newspaper on or the television on, he seems to be on talking about John Tory at night. So he's a pretty reputable lawyer in this sense. And anyway, we're just renewing the contract for this year. And I think because he's got ongoing matters with us, it's the prudent thing to do. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else about this? All those in favor then, please indicate. Thank you, that's carried. .2 is a report for information from our bylaw enforcement officer, Paul Rossiter, for the year 2022. Again, mover and seconder, please, that the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone received the bylaw enforcement officer's 2022 annual report for information. That's moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Bray. Thank you. Any discussion on this one? Yes, Councillor Woods.
Tweety bird. It's you.
Yeah.
That better?
There must be
Much better.
something about the placement of them. I don't know, but can you just
That
turn
one,
the,
that one's off
you
completely. now.
just have to turn the little button. You don't have to power it off, just to,
It was, that one was on mute and still making that noise.
well, it was on, it was still making noise when it was on mute. Oh, okay.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick ones. The rental unit license, $3,800. How much is our rental license and how many would we have in the municipality?
Madam CAO, do you want to? She needs to. Oh, gosh.
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. It's $200 for the year. And I believe we have 19. We have a few more since that report was done. We just approved a couple recently.
Okay, yeah, that'll be all. Thanks.
Just for the benefit of people who are listening, he doesn't collect the rental fees. He's simply indicating the fact that there is revenue from rentals, which offsets some of the expense associated with his enforcement activity. And he certainly does go on enforcement calls relative to complaints about short-term rentals. So that's why that's there. Anything else? Yeah, Councillor Lamb?
Yeah, again, just for information, the rental unit bylaw is on the agenda for this council to look at and review and renew. And it should be coming, I would think, in the next month or two before us. And so I encourage everyone to get involved in it. It's 19 licenses. I would guess there's 19 places at my end of the lake alone that are renting, let alone So obviously, we were one of the first out of the gates with a short-term or a rental bylaw some years ago, and I was involved in it, and I thought it was the right thing to do at that time, but, you know, there are flaws to it, and we need to fix those flaws and march merrily on into the future with whatever we decide, so that's coming to us, so, and hopefully this time next year or the year after, if we do allow short-term rentals, which I suspect we will, that figure would be a lot more than $3,800. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Other comments about?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I was just gonna say a quick little statement. From what I understand, the total amount that's shown on the report is 6690. That's made up of four numbers for dog tags, dog kennel license, rental unit, and parking. And from what I understand, those are the total fees that we collected as licensing fees in the municipality was the 6690. If I'm correct in understanding it. And from what I see in the report, the bylaw officer put in about 334 hours. And I believe somewhere in the agenda here, do we know how much the bylaw officer, which maybe it's not for today, I'm just wondering how much that department costs the municipality or what we budgeted in a year. I was trying to find it here and I'm just curious. I know we've collected 6,600. I thought it was here. I just can't find it.
Madam CEO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Without getting the exact number, it's somewhere in the range of 22 or 23,000.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else about the bylaw officer's report? If not, can we have a show of hands to receive it, please? Thank you. Next on the item 11, the next on the agenda is 11.3, which is an update, if you like, from a report that we received on February the 7th, which is it's about the budgetary control report for the 12 months ending December 31st. And during the discussion at the last meeting, councilors asked for some additional information about some of the items where there was a difference between what was spent and what was budgeted, or something of that sort that might be worth an explanation. And so in today's package, you have explanations provided by our treasurer, who is here. So before we deal with any questions about that, could I get a mover and seconder that the council of the municipality of Whitestone receive the memo and update from the February 7th, 2023 budgetary control report for the 12 months ending December 31st, 2022 for information? Councillor Woods moves, seconded by Councillor Bray. Thank you very much. Are there further questions or comments on this report? Councillor Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like to work with numbers, so I guess I had a number of questions, but I'm going to say a couple general comments to start off. And just when I was going through it in a couple spots, I'm just trying to find my bearings here. I'm just trying to find an example here. We have, what was it here? And as an example, on page 52 of 78, we have York Landfill Recycling 16,448. I know we'd asked about that one, and staff had said before that they were looking into it because it was high. And I noticed that the response we got was that the budget was based on the previous year. which was, it looks like here much lower than it was in 2019 and 2020. The thing that caught me in the response is I noticed it says a reallocation of $3,047 invoiced to Alds. So basically, we were under budget at Alds, and now we're going to transfer $3,000 from York landfill to Alds landfill. And when I went through, I also noticed in a couple other spots, for example, under facilities, line item 16-699, we had a budget of about, I'm rounding 90,000 for wages, and it came in at 110,000. And now we're saying approximately 15,400 to be reallocated to building and or admin. And I'm not sure why we're reallocating if the numbers are in the correct spot. I look at numbers every day, and just a general comment, I think we start running a very slippery slope if we start taking money that's over budget in one account and putting it to another. The numbers are the numbers, and the numbers don't lie. And I think once we start reallocating funds, we aren't really getting a real picture of stuff. So I think we have to be really careful in that, and it's happening. I think it's 3 or 4 spots throughout here. But one of my biggest questions is,
Sorry, before you go on to
Yeah.
another question, could we
Yeah,
let
that's
the
fine.
clerk
Sure.
address the
Yeah.
first one that you asked,
Yeah.
please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Other than the salaries, which I'll explain a little differently, wherever there's a note for reallocation, it's because something got charged to the wrong account. So what happens at the end of the year, we look at the detail of these accounts, and it happens, whoever coded the invoice coded it in the case of the Ald Road recycling. It got coded to York landfill instead of Alds Road. So it's not like we're moving money around to make accounts balance. If we're over budget, we're over budget. If we're under budget, we're under budget. So everything goes where it goes. With regard to the reallocation of salaries, people are paid in administrative account through the year, but they also help out the building department, or they're in facilities or do other things. And this gets reallocated at the end of the year, so it's not a messy, it's a one reallocation as opposed to doing it every time there's a payroll cycle. So that's the explanation for the reallocations.
Perfect. Thanks, Michelle. So the kind of the biggest thing I came across when I was looking at this, and I'm not sure if it's something that can be answered today or not. But I know our revenue was down. Again, we're not through the year. There's still bills coming in. There's still grants coming in. And I know we're waiting for a big grant from the nursing station of hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I know right now it says that we're in a deficit of $800,000. And when I look at the line item, I'm looking at page 57 of 78, and line item, excuse me, 15-790. And there's in our budget transfer between funds of capital, or really coming from different numbers of the reserve, is where that 510 is made up of different items of reserve. And I noticed it says that the transfer is going to be done once the audit is complete, which makes total sense to me. But when I went back and looked at the budget that was approved in May, I also noticed, and throughout the report, there's a lot of reserves that should have been paid through the year. And I'll point out some which were done on page 53 of 78, line item 16-774 says facility reserve vehicle $10,000. So we add an expense of $10,000 to the reserve as per the budget. And that goes through, there was 10,000 for facility reserves, 20,000 for road construction reserve, 25,000 for road equipment, 30,000 for fire pump, and 20,000 for forest fire. All those numbers added up to 95,000. However, in our budget, we show an input into the reserve of 498,000. So that leaves 405,000, or roughly, it's actually 403,000, which hasn't been input yet as expenses. So basically that 500,000 that we're going to be transferring once the audit's done, the 510, there's an offset of 405,000. So it's almost a wash, or within 100,000. So we're still really down. So I'm just wondering why on our summary on page 55 of 78, under all expenses, we don't show the big $400,000, which it still has to be allocated as an invoice and transferred somewhere. We're kind of leaving out a massive number, which will paint a much better picture of our financial statement. So I don't know if that could be reviewed and brought back to us or not.
Madam CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't pretend to speak for the treasurer. He may have a comment, but this is very typical of municipal finance, where the final transfer from reserves back and forth, whatever happens, happens after the auditor reviews all the documents. So the intent of the variance report is just to have a general understanding of some of the line items, where there's over expenditures, where there's under expenditures. And this is just a glimpse of what happened at the end of December. And of course, since December, there have been accruals back into some of these accounts. So it's not a true picture of the finances for 2002. And that will happen once the auditor gets here and we settle out all the expenditures. And just to speak to the grants, it is challenging. We are eligible for certain grant monies, but you have to make the expenditure first, then you have to apply and do a fair bit of comprehensive reporting, and then you hurry up and wait. And you wait for the money to come into the coffer. So it's not instantaneous, but the money will come. We've got some challenges with the nursing station, which I'll sort out with council when we get to budget, I'm not sure when that meeting is, but soon. And that's the explanation. I don't know if our treasurer wants to add anything to that.
Recording in progress.
This statement is not like a audited statement. Once we have a final audit, you have all the numbers. The transfer funds happen is an actual amount. Only expenditure part has been recorded on the reserve. Other part will be done once the auditor confirm what are the entries. That point and will be have a clear picture. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you very much. And yeah, the only reason it jumped out at me is, as you just said, Manish, normally the expenses are included, but yet I see some on our budget, 343,000, which was supposed to be allocated in our budget for asset management, which hasn't been input yet at all. 30,000 for infrastructure, 10,000 for landfill, 10,000 for fire vehicles. So there's, like I said, there's still 400,000 in expenses that I think still have to be put on the books here. That'll offset the 510,000 coming out of our reserves. So I think we just need to be really cognizant of that, because if you do those quick numbers, we're still going to be in a deficit, it would look like, from the expenses that I see right here, right now. Thank you.
Madam CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our public works manager has just joined us, and although the discussion of the Freightliner didn't come up in this discussion, there was some previous questions about Freightliner costs under accounts payable. So if Councillor Lamb would like him to answer that, speak to that, that would be fine. He's here.
Yeah, David, I just noticed, not only in this meeting, but in other meetings, lots of stuff on the Freightliner. And I guess my question is or a couple of questions. How old is the Freightliner?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have 3 Freightliners.
Huh, well, maybe that's why I'm noticing it all the time.
We have our 3 main plow trucks. We have 3 main plow trucks that we plow all the time. And they are each Freightliners. And that allows for a lot of interchangeable parts. So we don't have to stock, a different part for each vehicle. A lot of our neighbors also run Freightliners as well, which helps if we're short on something or need something. Rather than stocking it ourselves, we can borrow it from a neighbor. So you'll notice that the prices are high on the Freightliner because that's what we run.
How old's the oldest Freightliner?
So the oldest Freightliner we have is a 2015. I believe the other one is, trying to think, it's a 2017. We have a 2021, or sorry, 2020. And our backup is a 2008, the International, and that's an International, which is in very good shape for the age. It doesn't cause us too much grief. It doesn't seem to break down very often. It's just worn. It's just it's well used, but other than that, it doesn't have the newer after treatment on the emissions. So it
When
seems
are we scheduled to replace the 215 Freightliner? This
I-
year or
no.
next year? Or
No, I certainly hope not. No, they run longer cycles. So typically the smaller vehicles, the ones we run around in the light duty trucks, those ones are good for 7 years. 7 years that's the schedule for getting rid of them. The bigger trucks can get 11 to 13 years. As I spoke, we got a 2008, which we still run quite a bit. So a very good truck. If it's a good truck and it's too expensive, we'll run longer on it. But our trucks, as you can tell, they are maintained. So we maintain them in good shape. We don't have any blister in the pack, so to speak, that's going to jump out at us and bite us that I can tell you of. So 11 to 13 years is typically what we look at for those. The grader can run 11 to 15. Again, the grader has been maintained properly under my watch, and you can see the bills to back it up. But we have nothing jumping out at us as far as that's concerned for those big trucks. I understand the next big one you're going to see is it's the fire department's turn to get one. So does that
Okay,
answer
thank
your
you.
question?
Thanks, David.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, I just had one final question, but if David's on the line, he might be able to answer it actually. The last question I had was, I know we bought a backhoe throughout the year. And I noticed on page 57 of 78 that we took out a backhoe financing for backhoes who have added as a credit into our revenue of 183,115. So obviously I'm assuming that's for the backhoe purchase, but I noticed a line that was supposed to be coming out of reserve of 110,000 for roads equipment reserve. So I'm just wondering if the 110,000 was allotted for the backhoe, why would we have taken out a loan for 183,000? Or is the 110,000 for a different piece of equipment that wasn't the backhoe? Kind of what were we assuming that money was going to go to for equipment when we spent it this year?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I will have to get some help and get back to you on this. I'll have to get help from the treasurer on this one. Basically, once it's approved, the treasurer finds where the funds are coming from and how they move in and out of reserves. So I will have to get some answers for you and get back to you on that.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to put you on the spot there, David. Sorry. When I heard you on the call, I thought you might have known, that's all.
So I noticed that Barb Cribbett, who is on the call on Zoom, has her hand up, and I wonder, Barb, if you were going to answer an earlier question about reserves, or perhaps even the one about the loan for the backhoe. I don't know but if you would like to jump in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to clarify, there was a question regarding the amount of money that had been transferred to the reserves, and I think that Councillor Nash was concerned there was a shortfall in terms of what had already been booked to date. I'm just wondering, on page 47, the largest transfer that we have into reserves, which is reflected as an expense, is the asset management reserve contribution of $338,000. That's on page, as I said, page 47. It's just above total general government. It's line 16-163. I'm not sure if you were including that, Councillor Nash, in your calculations.
I was not, Barb. So that takes care of that's what I was looking for. That
Okay.
took care of about 343,000 of the 403,000 that hadn't been allotted for. So I guess there's just 60,000 that's left to be accrued for. Yeah, that's perfect. So underline 16-163. I didn't notice that. So perfect. That answers it. Thank you very much.
Okay, and there may be, most of those should be done now. In terms of the $110,000 from the equipment reserve, we do have a schedule that identifies the funding for each capital project, and that was not funding that was for the backhoe that I can recall. I think it was 100% supposed to be funded from debt financing, but I can work with Benish and find that for you.
That'd be great. Yeah, it was just on the budget. It said works vehicle. That's why I was wondering. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments about this? Councillor Woods.
Real quick. Just a real quick one. York Recycling. It cost us double in 2022 than 2021 for recycling there. Did we have an increase in tipping fees or we go double? I don't think we've had that many more people deciding to recycle. It's always been pretty consistent.
Sorry. Dave, did you hear the question?
Yes, thank you very much, through you, Mr. Mayor. That was under budgeted year. So if you look year over year from 2019 to 2020, it was up near the $30,000 mark. This amount of money is not all. We get money back from Waste Diversion Ontario. So the expense that we pay, we receive 40 to 50, probably close to the 50. We try and get really close to the 50% of our costs. And that, when I talk about costs, the operating costs related to the blue box items. So a portion of our staffing, a portion of our electricity bills, heating, and so on and so forth, administrative goes, it gets reimbursed. So as this goes up, so does the amount we get back goes up as well. But in 2019 and 2020, it was up near the $30,000 mark. The $3,000 that needs to be reallocated to ALDS was an invoice that had a portion on the back of the page that was supposed to go to ALDS, and reading it and going back through all the invoices, I found that there was an amount that should have been to ALDS. But I guess there was a dip with COVID, a small dip we had. But you're absolutely right. If you look at the trend, it's been pretty consistent, the amount of recycling. It would be nice to think that people are recycling more, but I don't think they are. So there is a trend if we go back year over year. It was just under budgeted to 20 when it should have been up in the mid 30s.
Okay, something to catch for the 2023 budget, I guess. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, can we receive this report then for information, please? All in favor? Thank you. All right, so 11.4 is a request concerning the West Prairie Sound Recreation and Culture Center Joint Municipal Services Board. I'll read it to you and I'll ask for a mover and seconder. Whereas the municipality of Whitestone entered into a funding agreement with the West Prairie Sound Recreation and Cultural Center, the Joint Municipal Services Board, on October 31st of 2022. And whereas the financial commitment for the municipality of Whitestone is contingent upon a review of the operating model, projected operating costs and reserve requirements for the facility undertaken by independent management consultants with expertise in such reviews to be completed prior to final design of the facility at the board's cost. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone requests staff to send a letter to the Joint Municipal Services Board and request confirmation that the board intends to proceed with the review and to confirm the expected timeline for completion. Is there a mover and seconder for this? Councillor Lamb is moving. Is there a seconder? Councillor Woods. Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion? Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I asked that this be put on the agenda. I did attend by Zoom the last meeting of the Pool and Recreation Center. I think they've got some pretty aggressive plans to even perhaps start something this year, if not this year, next year. And the reason I put this on is we're pretty firm in what we wanted as a condition for our both capital and operating contribution to the project. And we have to know if they're going to do the study or not affirmatively. And we have to stress to them, whether it's by letter or by verbally, that it has to be an independent study. This isn't a study that, you know, they kind of say, here's the study from 2019. You kind of take a look at it and confirm it. It's an independent study of the costs and the revenues and the reserves required. And I think we have to stress that. We did not link any results to the study. So it could say it's going to make money, lose money, whatever. It's not contingent on the results. It is contingent, however, that the study be done. So I'm glad to move it so we can get an answer, and maybe we have to budget 250,000 this year. We don't know, or maybe not, or maybe next year. So I think that can be the reason for the ask. And okay, so thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments? Questions?
I just had a really quick comment, if I might, Mr. Mayor, through you. And all it was I noticed on the agenda for 11.4, it just gave the summary West Prairie Sound Recreational Culture Center Joint Municipal Service Board Agreement. And we were provided with no backup, no information whatsoever. And I didn't get the resolutions until I sat down tonight. I know sometimes when we have motions that are brought forward, we show them under business matters as a draft motion for everybody to see in the agenda. So I think if we can just stick to either putting them in the agenda or not putting them in the agenda, if we just stick to doing it one way or the other, whichever way it might be. But I think some background info when we have it, I don't even have a piece of paper for it in the agenda. I don't even have a number 11.4. So just going forward, I think if we can include some background information to the councillors, it would help, but also that would provide some background info for the public and keep it more transparent. That's all.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a fair comment. I think that I guess I would, I guess I would be very, very surprised if they said, since they signed the agreement, if they said, no, we don't intend to do it, but there is a useful piece of information, which would be, when do we need to budget for them? For these funds? that's a legitimate question to ask and.
Yeah. Very important question.
And I think, so anyway, that's my only comment. Anything else? All right, all those in favor, please indicate. Okay, thank you, Phil. Try to get an answer. 11.5 is a memorandum accompanied by a draft trailer bylaw. This is for information. We're not proposing to approve the bylaw. But to just get it on the table, could I ask for a mover and seconder that the council of the municipality of Whitestone receives the memo and draft trailer bylaw for information, and that council requests staff to make the refinements as discussed to the bylaw and bring the updated bylaw to a future council meeting? Mover and seconder, so Councillor Woods is moving. Is there a seconder? Councillor Nash. Thank you. And I'll ask there is a report from our CAO clerk about this, where this came from, so I'll ask her if she wants to introduce it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This came from the official plan amendment, and our planning assistant Paula Macri, who is on the line. And I'm going to ask her to introduce it. She started the process by researching other municipalities, looking at our old bylaw, looking what a newer bylaw should look like, because our old bylaw was outdated and it wasn't, some of the wording was difficult to understand. So Paula, are you there? We'll get her a minute to unmute.
I don't actually see her on the list.
She is on the phone.
Oh, she's one of the phone numbers. Okay, sorry.
She did know she was going to speak. Can you hear me, Paula? Okay, well, we'll just proceed without her. I do see her there. So as I said, this project was started by our planning assistant, and she worked with Paul Dre, who is our former prosecutor, who has done numerous trailer bylaws and understands the enforcement context, worked with our CBO, and also worked with our bylaw enforcement officer, who indicated that he was going to join us tonight, and I've given him the 5-minute warning. Let's see if he's coming. Oh, Paula said she's here. Thanks, Paula. Can you speak up? Okay, we're not hearing Paula. Oh, and Paul Rossiter unfortunately has said that he can't join us tonight. So we'll just carry on. As the mayor said, the intention is not to pass the bylaw tonight, but this is a first pass of what an updated trailer bylaw should look like. And there's some decisions that council needs to make. And we've given some examples on from other municipalities in terms of costs and how they manage their trailer bylaw. In some cases, they allow for a trailer to be on vacant land all year, but occupancy is limited to from May till November. Our previous bylaw, even though it was difficult to read, my interpretation was that you could have the first 30 days of your trailer on the lot for free, no charge. And then after that, it was $20 per month. And the license expired at the end of December. And there was some grandfathering of some older trailers, but those trailers have now disappeared since the original trailer bylaw was implemented back in 2000. So that's a little bit of an introduction. I've tried to, in the memo, we've tried to point out some of the things that we've done and that we've looked at for a trailer bylaw. And there's some simplicity to this. It's really around, other than the wording around the enforcement and the definitions and what I would call the legalese, is really the decision of if you're going to allow trailers on vacant lands, how long are they permitted to be there? How long are you going to permit occupancy? And what would it cost someone to have a trailer on a vacant lot? So a few decisions for council to make other than the wording. You know, there's some wording that was prepared, like I say, by our prosecutor. So hopefully that's a good introduction to where we are with this bylaw. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. If we can entertain some questions or comments from council, if there are minor cosmetic things, words missing or that sort of thing. I notice there are a few places where that is. Please don't. Let's not take up our time tonight with that, but if you can pass those on to our CIO. But if there are things that are substantive, or if you have any comments in regard to there's a few red markings, for example, they're like one of the questions that's being asked is, should people actually be required to remove the trailer at some point outside of the season from the property, and store it somewhere else, or as many other municipalities do, is it simply a restriction on how many months out of the year you can occupy it, that sort of thing. So some of those things, if you have comments on, or if you see there's other things that don't make sense or at all, you'll notice that this is a much more fulsome bylaw than the previous one. It has a lot of extra material, and it's some of which, by the way, is necessary to make it enforceable, I believe. So I think you have to kind of anticipate that there would be some additional wording to it purely for legal reasons. But other than that, if you have comments or questions, we could take them now for a few minutes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I might.
Go ahead, Councillor Nash.
I guess as this came up, I'm guessing it goes back to the previous council. So I guess my couple first questions, just as a starter, was there ever like a council committee that worked on the trailer bylaw? Or was this just through staff? And I think you mentioned a couple other legal opinions, Paul Dre.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, there was no committee. These bylaws really should be staff led. They should be led through the clerk's office or through the department that has carriage of that bylaw. So the decision was to work with Paul Dre, as I said, who has experience in writing bylaws and making them enforceable, because he was a former prosecutor, so he knows what's enforceable and what isn't. And of course, there was interest from our bylaw enforcement officer who has experience, and also from our CBO.
Okay, yeah, I just wasn't sure. Thanks. So I guess just when I quickly reviewed it, and I'll just go on I got a lot of yellow highlights. So I don't think I'll go through them all here if we're not approving it today and it's just for comments. But I guess when I read the very first page 1 of 4 of the report, on page 60, 11.03.01, I think this summarizes what I think of the trailer bylaw. The municipality of Whitestone discourages trailers. And I think it's either we allow trailers or we don't, and to put words in like we discourage it, I don't think is appropriate. And then just going through it, I think just in some generalities, if I look up the MTO or the Highway Traffic Act and look up motorhome or trailers, it's different than our definitions. So I think we really have to make sure that MTO or the Highway Traffic Act and our definitions are the same, just in general. And just when I'm going through it, I know we talked about bylaw, but under 2.3, I'm just going to read, like I said, I'm just going to go through a few. This bylaw applies to a trailer placed on a property prior to the enactment of this bylaw. So I think we're taking out all of grandfathering and basically say, if you have a trailer there now, we'll be able to do something to you. And in 3.2, what we're proposing.
Sorry if I to interrupt you, Councillor Nash, but is that a concern to you? Are you objecting to that or?
Well, yeah, I'm just going through my comments, but yeah, I'd object to it because I think we're either going to allow trailers or not. And if we can't grandfather anymore, are we going to go through and tell 100 people to remove their trailers because we're enacting a new bylaw that hasn't been enforced? So I have a big problem with 2.3, to be honest.
So you're suggesting that they should be grandfathered, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to understand what your
Yeah,
comment
and
was.
then-
Go ahead.
Again, I don't want to go through them all, but under 3.1, no person shall own, occupy, keep, store, or permit to be occupied, keep or stored a trailer on vacant property without a valid license. I'm just going through a couple here. This was the other one, sorry. Don't know why I brought that last one up. Under 9.1, under B, the applicant or licensee, this is under grounds for refusal, revoking, or suspension. And we have a line in here which says the applicant or licensee has passed breaches or contraventions of any law or any provision of this bylaw or any other municipal bylaw or provincial or federal state. And then it goes on to other stuff. And I'm like, the way this reads, if I have a parking ticket, you guys could say you're not getting a trailer because I had a parking ticket in the past. So I think that really has to be cleaned up. I don't think it should be based on if somebody's broken the law in the past and they've paid their dues, whatever it is, a fine, jail time, whatever it might be, you can't hold them back from getting a trailer permit because of that. And item A under 9.1, it reads, I'll read 9.1 to start. An applicant or licensee is entitled to a license upon meeting the requirements of this bylaw, except where A, the past or present conduct of any person. So I have no idea who's going to say the past or present conduct of any person.
There's words missing out of there.
Yeah, but who gets to say, well, we don't like you, so you don't get a permit? Or we like you, so you will get a permit. So I think there has to be a really lot of review going through this. I can keep going through this, but basically, unfortunately, when I look at it, I kind of get the sense of, you know, it's gone from a 2-page bylaw to a 10-page bylaw. And I looked up the one for Magnetawan, I think it was, and theirs is 4 pages. So we've gone from such a short one to something so detailed, and multiple pages are talking about orders and offenses and the hearing process and part of the hearing process. We're going to create our own committee of adjustment, for lack of a better word, and impose things that we feel is appropriate instead of the court system dealing with it. And one of the biggest ones under orders, under section 13, most bylaws in our municipality are driven by complaints by an individual or whoever. They might come in, file a complaint. We go and look at it. So they're complaint driven. And we're changing this to be the opposite of complaint driven, to be bylaw driven. Anybody can say, be it, you know, you don't need to have a complaint. You can start laying tickets as you drive down the highway when you see trailers. And I'm not sure why this one would be any different than most other bylaws, which are complaint driven. And I think the last one I'll speak to, I think it is a typo, but I think it lays prudent to what I think overall, that it's so heavy handed. And it's on 13.5. an officer who is unable to effect service of an order pursuant to this bylaw shall place a place card containing the order in a conspicuous place. I'm guessing it's supposed to be non-conspicuous, but when I read it, I go,
No.
that kind of sums up the bylaw, that it's almost like if we give you a trailer permit, we can take it away, we can give it to who we want, we can take it away from who we want, and we can do whatever we want. I'm sure that was a typo, but that's kind of just in general. I think there has to be a lot of work going through this. And just at the very end, we don't have anything that mentions what the fines would be. We've made this big bylaw and it doesn't say it would be a $50 fine or $100 fine. There's nothing there to talk about fines. So I'd ask if I could, as staff goes back and relook at it and maybe bring it back to council for another time. And I know I got a copy of the rescinded bylaw. And I know we also have a copy which says for council only, but I think it might be handy if that rescinded bylaw was in the package so people could see in the public what the bylaw used to read versus what it reads now. Sorry for the very long-winded comments.
Okay, Madam CAO.
Yeah, through you, I'm not going to answer all the questions, but firstly, that item you thought was a typo is not. If they're gonna serve someone, it has to be in a conspicuous place so the person sees it, not inconspicuous. But that said, you meant one of the first things you mentioned is 11.03.1. So this is the wording that is shown there. If you read above, section 11.03 trailers is hereby amended by deleting the section and replacing it with the following. So that has already been approved by council. So you're right. It says Whitestone Council discourages trailers, motorhomes, etc. So that's where the decision making has to come in terms of how you want to manage trailers on vacant land and for how long and the cost. So other than that, there's, it may be helpful to have Paul Dre come and speak to council. He is the expert bylaw writer in terms of enforcement. And I think 90% of the time you don't have to do enforcement, but when you have to do enforcement, you want to have the tools to do it correctly. So hopefully that helps, but we'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, are there other comments? Councillor Woods?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think some of them, maybe I'll just send a list to the CAO and save everybody some time. But there's a few that I wanted to ask. Does anywhere in this trailer bylaw, I've never heard any mention of tents, someone putting a tent on their property for a weekend or a week or a month or 2 months. Are we allowed to? Yes or no?
The under 11.0.2, which was the new wording in the official plan, a trailer, motorhome, or tent is a permitted accessory use to be a permitted to a permitted dwelling where such uses function as accessory uses. Tents is not mentioned above. So anyway, tents are mentioned throughout here, but that's a good question for clarity. I don't know the answer. I'll have to talk to John Jackson, who was the writer of the official plan amendment, what his intent was, and maybe what, council would have to understand what their intent was.
So say someone gets a trailer, we pass this, they get a license, we let them keep it for 6 months, 7 months, the whole year, whatever we end up deciding upon. Is that person allowed to obtain a rental license to rent it out to people?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, the answer is no.
No. Okay. Now, would this include a trailer, a box trailer, garbage trailer that doesn't have a plate on it for the road and sits in the back of a 200-acre woodlot and only gets pulled out to the road to bring the wood there so it can go in the truck to bring it home? I'm not allowed to leave a box trailer on 100-acre woodlot?
These, I guess I'll try and answer by saying these are trailers that you can live in. They do not include the kinds of trailers that you're talking about, which many of us have, and
Or boat trailer, right? Like
and
if I
they're
know if
not, they're not, I mean, they're like equipment. It's like trying to regulate how many vehicles you can have of various types for different things, or how many boats you can have of various types. I don't think we're in that business. I hope we're not in that business. But these are ones that people are using as their accommodation,
Mhm.
as an alternative to having an actual building built, right? That they can live in. And you're supposed to be able to cook, sleep, and you know,
The one specific thing that I'm thinking about when it comes to the woodlot, so I own a property on the water. I only have an acre. I got a nice big cottage, I got a garage. Kids, vehicles, everybody parks in the driveway. And I got a boat trailer for my 26-foot boat. But I own the empty lot across the street. And I don't want to jam up my parking at the cottage with my empty boat trailer and my trailer that I take all my garbage to the dump with. Can I park it across the road on my empty lot without getting a license? Or getting a ticket for doing so?
I think, again, my answer would be, I think if you look at the definitions here, if, as I read them, they do not include the type of trailers you're talking about. So no, you would not get a license for them.
So am I
Yeah,
still
other than-
allowed to
other
leave
than-
my trailer? over
Other
there? That
than
was the
from
question.
MTO, if you want to drive it on the highway, right?
No, but
Yeah.
I'm,
Yeah,
if I got a box trailer and my boat trailer and everything, I don't want to leave it at the cottage and I leave it at the vacant property across the road and my neighbor calls and says he's got empty trailers just sitting there on the property. Is bylaw going to come and find me? Or are we not talking about that trailer? It's specifically only, and then it's free game on every
Oh.
other kind of trailer on an empty.
I would argue that this bylaw is not talking about those trailers. I suppose that there could be some other bylaw that, such as we have a clean yards bylaw or a property standards bylaw or something, and if you were in the middle of a residential area, you had a vacant lot and you were letting everybody park empty boat trailers on it or something, that could conceivably be, I'm guessing, could conceivably result in a complaint under one of those bylaws, but it's not, it doesn't have anything to do with this one. Because these are not trailers you can live in, right?
Yep.
Okay, that's, I don't know. I would just make the comment that, again, Councillor Woods is asking a question that I remember asking when this subject came up, when we were talking about the old trailer bylaw that we had. And the issue or the question that I asked was, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? And this gets to the comment that Councillor Nash made earlier, I guess. I think the consensus of council at the time that this discussion took place was that it's preferable for people to actually live in a building than in a trailer. But I have to say, many of us have used, camper trailers and other kinds of trailers of that sort for overflow accommodation and at various stages. My family, when the kids were little, we camped on a piece of property that we own with tents. And now, did it inconvenience anybody else? Could they see it from the road or from their cottage properties or from the lake or from anything else? No, they couldn't. Right, so, but I guess the question was, that's a question that I think we have to ask ourselves when we have the discussion about this. Anyway, I don't want to, I understand your question.
And if I might help out, Councillor Woods, I think your question, the definition of trailer in the proposed bylaw and the definition of trailer under the Highway Traffic Act or MTO are two completely different things. So if you were to take the trailer definition in MTO or Highway Traffic Act, it'd be the trailers you're talking about. We're mentioning that we're going to define a trailer differently, which is why, similar to what you said, I was bringing it up saying, I think we have to be really careful to make sure we're using the correct definitions of what MTO and Highway Traffic Act classify as a trailer. If that helps.
Yeah. In that connection, I would just make another point for people to think about offline, not tonight, but you'll see references in here to the suggestion of those references. I read them is that the zoning bylaw, which also has a bunch of definitions in it, those definitions have precedent. So if there's a particular word in the zoning bylaw, it would have. And that's consistent with, sort of hierarchy of administrative law. But of course, there's another level above that, which is the official plan, and it has definitions in it. So you have to go back and look at what the official plan says about trailers and about camping and about campgrounds and all those various other things. And then you have to look at and then the zoning bylaw has to be consistent with that, because that says on this zone, you can do those things. And so those definitions have to be consistent. They don't actually have to be consistent with the Highway Traffic Act, but they do have to be consistent with those three documents, I would suggest. So, and I'm assuming that Mr. Dre, in fact, did that because he would understand this. So anyway, look, I'll just ask one more question. I see that our John Jackson is on the call, so I want to get back to the the other agenda items soon. But if there's any parting comments, Councillor.
Well, let's bring it to another meeting, because I've got lots of questions on this, and I feel like suddenly, I guess I don't have any comments on it, because we got to get,
Well,
if we want to come back to it after we deal with the planning matters, that's one way to deal with it. But I have a lot of questions on this, and I know the history of the trailer bylaw going back 15 years. So, but I don't want to take up 10 minutes going through this is the problem with bringing, and again, I want to thank staff for all the work they've done on this, but here we sit with an 11-page document that I think is a little bit of overkill. And, anyway, can we come back to it?
we can, sure,
I mean, after the committee of the whole, and I'll give you my comments.
sure.
Oh, yeah,
Sure.
that's how I'd rather deal with it than deal with it now, I guess. Thank you.
All right, well, let's just put this, let's just suspend this particular item for the time being, and we'll come back when we've dealt with the planning items. So now what we need to do, I'm just going to put this aside so I don't get things mixed up here too much. Our next what we'd like to do then is go back to item well, it's really item 5, I guess, planning items. First thing we need to do is to move into committee of the whole so that we can have some comments without a motion on the floor. So could I get a mover and seconder, please, to move into committee of the whole? Councillor Woods moves. Councillor Nash seconds. And the time is 7:57. All in favor? And my thanks to those of you who are in the room and on the call who've been patient with this delay in the item that you probably came for. But anyway, so the first item that we have is the subdivision application from STO Network Consulting Incorporated. And the usual procedure for this, we do have a memorandum from John Jackson, planner, on behalf of the Parry Sound Area Planning Board. It's dated February 13th. So John, I see your picture here on. We are.
I think
Would you like to kick this off, please?
certainly, your worship, members of council and attendees in the meeting. This application came to the Perry Sound Area Planning Board in April of last year. And after the holding of several meetings, including a public meeting, which interestingly enough is no longer required for plans of subdivisions or consents under the new Planning Act reforms, we are at a position to take the application with some specified conditions to the next step, which would be to have council have any questions they have outstanding answered, and have the Perry Sound Area Planning Board issue what's called a draft plan approval with conditions. And to facilitate the process, I have provided the municipality in my summary with a series of conditions that would be attached to the approval. The most significant perhaps change to the application is that we have consolidated the first 3 lots at the south end of the property, if that's the right direction, lots 1, 2, and 3 into 2 lots, in recognition of some constraints that we think were fairly presented. So it's now an approval for 8 lots subject to the conditions that are listed. So if there are, I think the summary report speaks for itself in terms of what those items are. The conditions show how they're going to be implemented. And if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. I'm not sure who's in the who's attending the meeting, but I'm sure the applicant or his agent is represented as well. And I'll turn it back to the chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The applicant is in fact in the room this evening. Graham Keane, did you wish to make any remarks? If you do, maybe I could ask you to just go to the microphone at the podium. That way the people who are on the Zoom call can hear you. Sorry, I'm going to check and make sure that mic is on. Excuse me. Let's see if it's. No, it isn't.
Testing.
Go ahead.
Hello? Okay.
Now we got you. Thanks.
Yeah, John, it's Graham Keane here. I do have a few questions, not of criticism, but more of lack of understanding. The first question I have is really in condition number 3. I'm not quite sure what that means, that the owner agrees in writing to satisfy all requirements, financial and otherwise, of the municipality of Whitestone concerning the provision of services and drainage if applicable. I kind of get the feeling that that's an open-end statement, that I'm not sure what it's going to cost me in the end, or is it non-applicable in my case? I was just wondering if you could expand on that a little bit, please.
Did you, through you, your worship, did you want Mr. Keane to give me all his questions and then answer them, or answer them one at a time? It's your preference.
Do you have more questions or?
I do have more questions.
Well,
I guess depending how complicated.
Depends how many, yeah, it depends how many there are. I don't know. Why don't you go ahead and answer that one question and we'll see how we go.
Okay, this is a standard type condition for all subdivisions, and I think Mr. Keane has actually characterized it correctly. I doubt that there's any drainage issues at all with respect to a water access single tier shoreline development, so that's not proper reference. There could be a service issue that has to be implemented, say, as an example, through some kind of legal document requiring a municipal solicitor to be engaged. But I think for the most part, he's correct, or Mr. Keene is correct, that this is probably a standard condition that may have no impact to him whatsoever. Thank you.
Okay, John, thank you. I just don't want to get bit down the road here. The next question I have is with respect to condition number 7. We talk about the opening of the septic tank to be at the 100-year flood level of 229.5 meters, we'll call it 5.7 above sea level, and is to be certified by a land surveyor. What I'm trying to understand there is if we go to the building condition of the threshold of the building being over the 229.57, a land surveyor does not actually have to certify that the threshold is indeed above that level, but rather the architect or the designer puts it on a plan of survey that is indeed certified. Is that acceptable to you, i.e. what's good for the goose would be good for the gander?
It really is up to the chief building official. Bylaw as prescribed, including the condition, is going to require certification, and the only person that can certify that that matter would be a land surveyor. So the building official, unless he was more than confident that you're well over the theoretical flood elevation, I would say in most instances, if all instances on Lake Wawashkash, is going to require that kind of certification, because the floors or any openings of any new buildings has to be at that minimum threshold, as now does the opening of any septic tank, which is really not much more, if at all, more onerous than the actual structure, the habitable structure as well. So the surveyor is going to come in at some point, and that's got to be satisfied by the CBO.
Yeah, John, the reason I ask is because to get an Ontario land surveyor in to go, 120 volts, I mean, that's pretty difficult. They are booked up usually 8 months in advance, and they're very expensive. So if we had a certified map that showed the elevation and it was confirmed by the North Bay Mattawas being at that level, I'm hoping that based on your answer would be adequate.
I don't know how it could be, because I don't think anyone other than a certified land surveyor could make that declaration. So I appreciate knowing very well how tedious and difficult and arduous it is to get an Ontario land surveyor retained in short order, but I don't see any alternative.
Would having a certified septic installer, I mean, really, we're doing a vertical elevation from the water edge to 229.57. We trust the septic installer to measure 35 or 30 meters from the shoreline. Why could we not do the same vertically?
I think in the case of the circumstance of Wawashkash, where there is this critical issue, unfortunately, I don't think we have really any wiggle room. So I think that certification, as difficult as it might be, is something we're going to have to work around.
Okay. I guess my final question to you is I'm a little confused on the timeframes. Like if I go to notes to draft approval, Section 6, the final plan approved by the Parry Sound Area Planning Board must be registered within 30 days, or the Parry Sound Area Planning Board may otherwise withdraw its approval. Can you explain what that's all about, please?
Well, you virtually, at that point, you virtually have ticked off all the conditions. So that you have a document that myself or whoever is in my position as the Secretary Treasurer will actually stamp and certify a Mylar after it's been checked by the RO, the registry office. So it's virtually only the time necessary to take it from my office and deposit at the registry office. So probably it's going to be done in a matter of days once you've got all of the items fulfilled. So the plan's done, the survey's done, it's been checked and rechecked by the registry office. So you fulfilled the subdivision agreement requirements. You've done virtually everything. So it's just now a matter of getting it finalized, and you're going to be the man. The applicant's going to be the more, how should I say, wanting to have the final plan registered and deposited as soon as those conditions are fulfilled, because that's when you can begin to transfer lots.
So waiting for a final plan of survey in April, that it does not become an issue.
No, not at all.
Okay, all right. Well, that's, sir, that all my questions answered. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you. We do we do have a couple of other individuals that have requested to speak to this, and we have a little bit of additional information that we didn't have at the last, when this was last considered in the fall. So I wonder who from the Wabash Conservation Association, it's John Melvey is going to speak first. Okay, John.
Mayor and councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak to this issue. I'm going to try and be brief. I submitted a document this afternoon, or my sister did. All of you councillors and mayor received it in email. You've got a hard copy of it in front of you as well. We've also retained an engineering firm, an environmental engineering firm, to look at the appropriateness of the plan of subdivision for septic systems, and specifically the criteria established in John Jackson's planning report. We have a number of significant concerns in respect of the plan of subdivision. We don't believe it meets the requirements of the Whitestone official plan. We don't believe it meets the requirements of the Ontario Building Code. We don't believe that the major issues identified in the environmental impact statement have been properly addressed. And we strongly urge the municipality of Whitestone not to approve this or any other plan of subdivision before the proponent has properly addressed all of the issues. So first of all, septic. This is, I think, our most significant issue. The proposed solution by John Jackson does not meet requirements of the Ontario Building Code or the official plan, the Whitestone official plan. We believe if those recommendations are followed, that septic fields would be at risk of flooding, depending on how high they are, could even be seasonally flooded. This, if the municipality accepts it, will certainly put the municipality at risk of litigation. To give a little background for those councillors who aren't familiar with Lake Wabashkesh and didn't benefit from the tour that we did last summer, lake levels in Wabashkesh are very unusual. That in that, especially in the spring, we have a spring freshet or flood of where 3 to 4 meters is not unusual, 3 to 4 meters above the level of our dam. And so our dam, some people say it's not a dam, it's really more of a gosh darn it, because it's an overflow dam. We can't control the dam. We can't open the dam to let more water out when water levels go up. We have a huge amount of intake capacity in the lake and a limited amount of outtake capacity. Our lake fluctuates significantly, not just in the spring, but throughout the season. If you look at the document that I submitted to you, we have a device on the lake named HoboLink. And if you go to the Wabashkesh Conservation Association website. You can look up at any time what the level of the lake is. But you'll see that the lake level fluctuates, not just in the spring, but all year long. You'll see the level of the dam on this graph, and you'll see that only for a period of time each year does the water level actually approach the level of the top of the dam. Most of the rest of the year, it is above the level of the dam. The level of the dam is at 224.94 meters above sea level. The report by John Jackson has recommended that leaching fields be placed between the 100-year flood level and the 224.5 elevation above sea level. So I think he's clearly made a mistake, because 224 is actually below the level of the dam. And if council permitted that, that is effectively saying a leaching bed is allowed below the level of the lake all the time. Now, I think it would be preposterous for an installer ever to do that, but that's in fact what this is stipulating. The other point in respect of this is that with all due respect to John Jackson, he is a qualified planner. He's not qualified to make judgments about how septic systems should be installed or approved. We should be hearing this if there is any difference at all from what the Ontario Building Code says, which it is explicit. It says septic systems shall not be in a place subject to flooding. Jackson's report is recommending that septic fields go in areas that can flood. So it's absolutely clear to me that we should be going to the approval authority, the authority having jurisdiction, North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority. Second of all, it shouldn't be a condition of the subdivision that whoever builds on the properties gets approval from North Bay Mattawa. The approval should be obtained, or at least agreement from North Bay Mattawa should be obtained ahead of time, before the plan of subdivision is approved, that a septic system is even viable on these lots. Subsequent to my presentation, we will have the engineer from Pinch and Associates, which is a highly regarded environmental engineering firm, a Canadian environmental engineering firm. They're going to present in more detail about this. So this is just a high level summary, but fundamentally, we believe this is a very, 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 very serious matter, and something that needs a lot of attention before any plan of subdivision can be approved. Hydrological study. The last council meeting, first of all, the Whitestone official plan requires that a hydrogeological study be submitted. We've not seen any evidence that this has been submitted. At the last council meeting, it was asked for, and we urged the council to require the proponent to submit a study. Topography and mapping. We agree with John Jackson that we need a topographical survey. There's no way to be able to ensure that building code requirements are being met in terms of elevation of openings, which our bylaw says must be above the 100-year flood level. There's no way, without understanding gradients on the site, whether an approved septic system can be installed above the flood level, whether side slope requirements can be maintained, and that erosion won't occur. So we also are requesting that, and as a matter of fact, the official plan, section 12.05.4 states, under certain circumstances within or near designated floodplains, an application for new development may be required to obtain a detailed engineering study to more accurately determine the level and extent of the regulatory flood elevation. So we urge council to require the proponent to obtain a topographical survey for the proposed lots to ensure viability of septic systems and that the code can be complied with. Parking. Parking arrangements in the proposal, the proposed.
Can I ask you to move quickly?
Almost done.
Please.
Almost done. Parking arrangements in the proposal remain the same in that we pointed out that the proponent's parking solution provides spaces in an unused clearing almost a kilometer from the public dock. It's clear that these spots will never be used. And we recommend strongly that council ensure that any parking solution the proponent provides is that the parking spots are in reasonable proximity to public docking or private docking. Environmental. I'll go through this very quickly. The environmental impact statement indicated there were a number of concerns that needed to be addressed with respect to species at risk, among other things. Site clearing requirements, erosion and sediment control plan, a development summary. None of this has been addressed in the plan of subdivision. Finally, docking. The proponent has not indicated that suitable docking locations can be provided in context of our water level fluctuation and in context of fish habitat. There's no indication that suitable docking locations can be provided for all of the lots. Instead, Jackson has proposed that a shared dock be provided and says, I quote, this revision will address the concern over the portion of the property with the lowest relief and incorporate the location of a dock along the eastern shore for all lots, end quote. No information has been provided on how this arrangement will work, including whether easements are required for access, the cost to build, the cost to maintain, the capacity, nor is there any indication of how this would ever be enforced. This strikes us as impractical because cottagers will be forced to load and unload at a significant distance from their cottage. So we urge council to ensure a viable dock plan is included as a condition of approval by council. We will be submitting a more detailed report, which is in preparation to council shortly. We trust the above summary alerts the council to significant deficiencies in the application. And we trust council will do the right thing.
Okay, thank you. Do you, sorry, who's going to speak next? Is there?
Well, I'd like to speak next. I think that this.
Well, we have the engineer from Pitch and Associates who can provide more detail on the septic, and where perhaps it makes sense to do that first and then provide an opportunity for rebuttal.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, this report that came out from Pension has no data that relates to the property in which I'm looking to subdivide. They're basing it upon their assumption of what the soil conditions are. Their disclaimers at the end of their report is longer than their actual report. How can we possibly accept a report that doesn't have any true facts? I think we probably have Mr. Bennett on the line who has done soil sampling on that site, and it is perfectly acceptable. And it has a perk rate that is within limits. So are we supposed to take a report that is based on guessing and by golly, or do we look at facts?
Well, I think there's an opportunity for discussion and questions. I'm just trying to get all the new new information on the table as quickly as we can, so that we're not
Go around the track on the same issues. I mean, if I had $1 for every time a Cormorant's Pond is mentioned, or a parking lot, I mean, I can tell you right now, their information is so badly flawed. It is a parking lot that was authorized by the municipality under license. The parking lot, by the way, is not 1 kilometer away from the dock. It is 500 meters. And if you go on Google Maps and measure it, so I get all this stuff from these.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to give counselors the opportunity. See, the purpose of this particular session that we're in is for people to present information, and then council can ask questions, which we're going to do in a few minutes. And you will determine, I think, from the questions council asks, what things their counselors might be concerned about. So I don't want to get into a debate on the floor of the meeting here about you know, I just want a very quick presentation, if you don't mind, of any new information. If there is someone who can summarize in a couple of minutes what the conclusions were of the pension report, I think counselors would like to hear that, and then we can move on to have some questions
But can I ask this one question? Is it fair that somebody stands up and says that Santa Claus is real, if we have to believe it? He refers to hydrological reports. We're not using groundwater, we're taking water from the lake. You don't need a hydrological report. It's not necessary. Okay, species of risk is not even coming to play in terms of a subdivision. That comes in at the time of building. Their information is wrong and flawed. And it is taking this whole process by delaying it 1 more month, 2 months, when we've done this and gone around this 4 times now.
Well, thank you. I understand what your position is, Mr. Keene. As I say, this is for the benefit of council to hear what people have to say. That's why we're doing this. So
Is council in a position where they're going to understand and have the resource and the knowledge to be able to challenge them?
I believe they will. I mean, that's
We've got
we kind of have to assume that. So
from you, sir, and I appreciate it. We're talking about 100-year flood levels that are up here on the chart. They're talking about 4-meter fluctuations.
okay, well, we're going to come to that in that issue in a few minutes. So where is someone going to present, hopefully very quickly, what the conclusions were of the pension report or not?
Yes, we'd like to get pension, they're online, and we'd like to have them reported.
And so, Lynn, can I ask, do you have something that you want to add that has nothing to do with what's been said so far?
I just wanted to make
Because
sure that pension was going to be able to speak, and I have questions for Mr. Jackson at some point.
Yeah, so I'm here.
Well, all right.
Mr. Mayor,
so who is the
Mr. Mayor, can I say one thing before Pincham starts? I appreciate everybody's time that everybody's put into this, and I know it's a very heated debate. But I think one thing we have to be very careful about here is this is not a public meeting right now. That was done 2 times already. Under Bill 23, there is no public meeting. I think all of council has received the report I have in front of me. I've read it. And I would assume if it's not the applicant and it's somebody else speaking to it, that this is not the time or the place to have a consultant for somebody else talking, because it's not a public meeting. And if that was to be done, you would have had to have filled out a delegation form to do so and gotten authority to do it. So I don't think now's the right time. I think the time has come and gone. That's just my opinion. Again, I do have it. I read it. But before somebody presents a report, we'd have to get opinions from our planner on it. I know it references a report that was written on October 17th, which I think was from the Waskash Association, if I'm not incorrect. But I don't think this is the time nor the place for a consultant for somebody against an application to be making a public presentation without filling out the proper work in the delegation forms. And I think if we're going to allow it, we should go through council and have a vote first. Because again, this is not a public meeting. That's happened 2 times already, and under Bill 23, there is no public meetings anyways. That's not the purpose of today. I think the purpose of today was for us to hear from anybody that wanted to talk on new information, not information that
we've already talked about or heard about, and it's based on new information. I just wanted to get that out before anything is said further on it.
All right, well, thank you for your, the reason that I believe this is appropriate is that it became, if you go back to the public meeting that we did have, it was quite clear at the time that there was additional information that should have been provided with the application. And I would go so far as to argue that it should have been provided before the application was deemed complete.
Yeah, but
And that would have saved us some difficulty here, but
if you remember.
sorry, you don't get to argue when I'm with me when I'm talking, please. That's not appropriate. And so, to be honest with you, I was expecting that information would be provided before this came back to us or to the planning board. Keep in mind, our job here is to make a recommendation to the planning board. And so I think the point that has been made is that some of the information that I certainly expected to see before this came back to the council is still not here. And the closest thing, the one thing that I did expect to see was I expected to see some site, so the results of some site engineering work. And I guess the closest thing we have to that is what this report from Pynchon has provided. So I guess I would, if it can be done quickly, obviously it's a long report, but I think I would like to hear whether it substantiates or refutes any of the concerns that have been raised or provides any new information. And I think council should have that when it decides what to do next.
Yeah,
So
if I might now, Mr. Mayor, just in response there.
sorry, you don't need to, you've already stated your opinion,
Yeah,
Councillor Nash. You are not the chair of the meeting, and
I know,
I
I'm
have to
still-
make some rulings on these things and try to move this along. And if we keep arguing about the procedure, we're going to be here all night and we still won't get the information we
I'm still allowed to make comments, Mr. Mayor. That's why I'm a counselor.
You'll have an opportunity to ask questions when this is over.
I can
That's-
I can make a comment now too. You just asked.
If I allow it, you can, and if not, you will wait your turn, please.
Mr. Mayor,
Let's play
Mr.
nice
Mayor,
and let's
I'm
play-
allowed-
I'd like someone else to speak, please,
Mr. Mayor,
if
If
we're
you want
gonna.
to call me out of order. call me
Yeah,
out of
I've
order.
called you out of order.
Okay, then I would ask under the
And I
procedural,
will,
I would ask under the procedural bylaw, let me find it. I know you like calling me out of order to these.
well, if you keep, if you
But-
keep arguing with the chair, Councillor Nash, I will remove you from the meeting. I have the power to do that too. So please stand down and let somebody else speak.
Mr. Mayor,
Your Councillor Lamb is trying to get in and you're preventing him.
under the rules of privilege, I'd ask the council make a vote to see if I'm allowed to make a comment. Go read section 16 of the procedural bylaw. Yeah, council can overrule you for calling somebody out of order. This is a very hot topic. We should be allowed to ask questions, and you can't stifle people and say that we can't talk when you don't like what.
But you're not asking questions. You're just making comments about procedure.
No, I was asking a question as to we should make a vote on this, and that was ignored. That's what I was asking. So I'd please ask under the rules of privilege that we have a vote to see if I'm allowed to ask my question and make my comment.
All right. Those in favor of allowing him to continue. All right,
All four councillors put their hand.
all right, go ahead.
Okay.
Can I?
So if you want to go first, so I can
I just want us all to.
get my,
You know, this is not really constructive. We're here to make a big decision and we've got to learn to play in the sandbox together and I don't know, I chaired one of these meetings last month. It didn't go this way. Because I said at the first, what this is about asking questions of John Jackson or introducing new material. That's what this meeting's about. It's not about parking, and we know about parking. We've received tons and tons and tons of communication. So quite frankly, I thought, John, some of your things were unnecessary. Okay, it's not a public meeting. And I know all those things. Most of council knows all those things, right? So if you have questions of John Jackson, in my opinion, they get asked, right? I think this report is new information. And I think that they should get the opportunity to at least talk to us for a couple of minutes, but it's not going on for 10 minutes. It's not a public meeting. It's a high level. I've read the report 3 times, so I think I know it. If they want to go high level, do it. And then let's move on to Lynn, I guess, who has a couple questions, or anyone else who has questions of John. And then John should have an opportunity to respond to John's presentation or anything else. Okay, so that this is fair. Mr. Keen, I'd ask that you just kind of, keep your cool. Okay. It's not going to help or hurt, but keep your cool, and it's not doing you any favors, believe me, by starting into debates. Okay, I'm sorry for lecturing, but let's hear from Pincham, in my opinion, and let's move on in a cooperative manner. Okay, thank you.
So
Go ahead, Pincham. Who's Pincham?
So it's
There you
Mr. Hutchison is the author of this report, I believe. Can you give us a quick summary, please?
For sure. Thank you very much. So I'm Ian Hutchison. I'm an engineer here with Pynchon. So we were asked to provide an overview of kind of the requirements to install septic systems in Ontario. So just high level overview, I think we can all agree the flood zone at the site is the 229.4757 meters above sea level. And then the Ontario Building Code is very prescriptive in terms of you cannot build leaching beds or septic systems in an area that can potentially flood. So I think it states there that, you need to keep a certain setback from the water and be above a certain elevation. So we concur with that and have put that into this report. I know there was a comment about the geology. We've used only available data, and not to say there isn't some additional information on it, but the Keene report states that there's a lot of bedrock at the site. Bedrock would be considered impervious and have a percolation time greater than 50, which in layman's terms means it's not going to absorb sewage very well. So there are certain requirements at this point to go to a raised leaching bed that would all have to be above that 229.57 meters, while adhering to the setbacks of the Ontario Building Code, which are 15 meters from a water body. And I know White to Stone recommends that there be a 30-meter setback. To kind of summarize things up, I think the areas of concern are that septics not be built in an area that exceeds 1 meter vertically and 4 meters horizontally. Just ensure they don't collapse and slide out of themselves, and that there's no abnormal erosion. That they be built in a specific soil and have a certain separation from either water, so high flood waters, or bedrock impervious soils. And that the building code is very prescriptive in saying that you cannot build in an area that flooding might occur, and that's written right in the Ontario Building Code. So to kind of summarize things up, there's definitely areas that I'm sure could be built on, but they can't be built in an area that floods. You've got to be 900 millimeters above that flood area, and you've got to be set back 15 meters from that flood area. So that's kind of a high level summary of our report.
Okay, thank you very much.
Question.
Councillor Lamb has a question.
All right,
Go ahead.
but since he's up, I guess the dispute here on this is that everyone agrees that that a class 4 tank or the top of the tank should be 229.37 or 57 or whatever it is. But the information that we, I guess, received as a result of the meeting of North Bay Mattawa and Mr. Keene and staff and Mr. Bennett and a whole bunch of people was that the leaching bed could be as low as, I think it was 224 or something, right? Where you're saying, Mr. Hutchison, that everything has to be above 229.57, if I understand it right. So I'd like the debate between you and Mr. Jackson to occur on that fact. I mean, you're stating that's what building code says, and you can't go below 229.57. But yet our information is that North Bay Mattawa, who are the governing factor in here, say that it can be as low as 224. So who's right? I guess that's my question. Because I don't know, I'm not an expert, right? What's the answer to it?
So I guess,
Jackson?
Mr. Jackson, do you want to answer?
We've heard from you, Mr.
Okay.
Hutchison.
Certainly through you, your worship. I'm not an engineer or technical person with respect to this issue, but it was canvassed at a meeting we had before the conditions were created. And the planning board retained an engineer who provided an opinion that because of the circumstances on Wawashkesh, and given the interpretation of the OBC by the approval authority in the past, he felt confident that the interpretation of the OBC under the section that talks about criteria for septic systems would allow the field, so long as it was not damaged by the spring freshet or flood levels, because there really wasn't a condition of erosion that would happen. It would just because the bed would become saturated. And his opinion was that as long as the openings of the tank were located above the flood elevation, that septic or sewage, raw sewage wouldn't get into the lake. And when the surge occurred in the spring, that section of the building code that says you must not build on an area of flooding that may cause damage was always interpreted by the approval authority on Wawashkesh to allow that to occur on that freshet level. And so we, I think, have satisfied that issue in this circumstance to the point where the conditions in the draft approval would recognize what the engineers have experience with respect to Wawashkesh. Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, if I might, could I just ask a follow-up question to John Jackson there? All it was John, I don't know if you can answer this, but I believe you'd be able to. I know in the report that we just heard about, it talked about the percolation rate. And would it be appropriate to say that quite often leaching sand or drainage sand is imported to site to create a tile bed if there is not enough soil on site?
That's correct. Now, again, as part of the meetings in advance of the consideration by council, we had the contractor in the meetings, and he advised that there are pockets of soil on the property, and they were percolation rates of about 15 because there were depths of soil, naturally occurring soil on the lands that were confirmed with the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Approval Authority. So if you don't have that present, my understanding it's quite common to import some soils, particularly for elevated beds. In which, to be fair to Mr. Hutchison, he wasn't able to attend to the site, so we could understand that that would be a limitation. So.
All right, is there any further comment in response to any of this, Mr. Hutchison, or?
Just that, yeah, no, I haven't seen the soil results for the entire site, so I would agree with Mr. Jackson. You know, I'm sure there are areas that have appropriate sand. That statement's based only on the Keene report that states there is bedrock and exposed bedrock throughout. We weren't privy to anything else that would indicate that there might not be. The one comment I would have is that the Ontario Building Code is very prescriptive, and I have it here in front of me. A leaching bed shall not be located in or on an area that is subject to flooding that may be expected to cause damage to the leaching bed or impair the operation of the leaching bed. Leaching beds are designed to take sewage and infiltrate it into the ground. I think it would be hard pressed to say that if a leaching bed was flooded underwater, that it could take the sewage and infiltrate it into the ground. Furthermore, if the leaching bed is flooded, it's just going to fill up the septic tank and flow back to it. So those would be my only comments with that.
Okay, thank you. So. All right.
Mr. Mayor, could I put some clarity to this whole thing? I think I can clear up a lot of issues. You give me a few minutes.
Would you like to speak here?
Would you mind? Could I do that?
Well, yeah, a very few. I'm suggesting that counselors normally are the ones who are asking the questions here. I'm trying not to have a debate going on the floor of the meeting for an endless debate. So, I mean, I can give you maybe 2 minutes, but please.
I think it's been agreed at this point that the entrance to the septic system, the septic tank should be over the 229.57. That falls in line with the building code in terms of the threshold level of the structure. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. So we can deal with that problem. I do believe that the number that was put into the report of 224 meters is not correct. So when you talk about the actual leaching bed and the Ontario Building Code, the building code states that you cannot put a leaching bed in an area that is subject to flooding. And subject to means likely, highly probable. If you look at the graph, Mr. Mayor, that you sent me, if you look at over the last 12 years, the highest we've ever had was in 2019. If you look at the actual 100-year level, it's up here. Okay. If you take a kind of an average or reasonable line, the level is 227 meters above sea level. Why can we not treat that as the high level of the freshet, and then the septic bed has to be above that? That way you're not seeing washing of the septic bed every year. It's very unlikely that the level will ever go above that, as we can see by the Hobo Lake that we've been measuring for the last God knows how many years. The whole idea, the notion of 229.57 meters, that's not even, I don't even know if it's 1 in 100 years. It's a 0.01 probability of ever occurring. I think it's a matter of being reasonable and logical that if our septic beds are above the freshet level, and even if the septic bed is saturated, it just stops working. It's not fatal. If we can keep the tank above 229.57 and the septic bed over 227, I think Mr. Bennett, who's an expert at this, would agree that this is a reasonable approach. But to can the whole thing because we are if we want to find an elevation, let's go back to Noah's Ark, that someday the whole world's going to flood. Is it reasonable that's ever going to happen? 227 every year is reasonable, but not higher than that.
Okay.
We're trying to find a solution here that's reasonable logic and uses some fundamental engineering principles.
Okay, but you do not get, and we do not get, none of us gets to rewrite the building code. That's another process here. I'm a licensed professional engineer, and I'm responsible under the legislation that controls that profession to make responsible provision for applicable codes and standards, and this is
Mr.
an
Mayor, you're
applicable code
assuming,
and standard.
assuming that the
So-
building code states that the,
You're,
no,
well,
you are.
I've read it as many times as you are, and my interpretation of it is that just what you said at the beginning, the tank and the entrance to the filter bed have got to be above the elevation. So my
No, I
question,
said the tank.
my question to you is, do you, can you, what, can you say with assurance that you actually have on some of those lots? I mean, clearly some of them, this is not a problem, okay? But can you say that on every one of those 8 lots, there is in fact any land above 229.57? You can't.
The building.
Your
the building
diagram
code-
does not, that you
There is-
provided suggests that there isn't.
The Ontario Building Code states that you may not place a septic bed in an area subject to flooding. If your son or daughter has epileptic fits, subject to epileptic fits, it's not once every 5 years, it's on a frequent basis. We do not see 229.57 on a frequent basis. And I think if we could go back together, and I too am a professional engineer for 32 years, and I've read the law and I don't see it the way you do. So I guess we're at the standstill. My whole objective here is I wanted to keep this whole thing in-house. I wanted to be reasonable. I have given full disclosure on everything. I've followed every step of the way in terms of the elevation of the building, whether electrical transformers can be underwater, all the various issues. There is an authority that takes care of that. If the North Bay Mattawa view this as being an acceptable process, why are we in a position to say otherwise? Are we suddenly the authority on everything? We have the MECP, the species at risk people. They don't even come into play until we start building, yet it's brought up as an issue. It's there. These people are hiding behind the guise of environmental issues when
Mr. Keane, this is not the time for
Yeah.
you to be doing this. Please,
Yeah.
please. I asked you 15 minutes ago to not do this, and what do? You go do it. Please let council hear from people and let them make their decision. Please, this is not, the meeting shouldn't be going like this.
Okay,
people.
is there any more new information that anyone has to provide?
I just have questions, Mr. Jackson. Am I allowed to ask questions?
All right, you may ask your question to Mr. Jackson, and then I'm gonna ask councilors to ask the questions they have.
So I think what I've heard is that we believe that North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority is the authority. So my question is, has North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority or the building inspector received a survey showing elevations on these 8 lots? As the authorities for permits for buildings and septics, assuming that this is the purpose of creating the lots. Have they received a survey, Mr. Jackson?
Well, each lot was examined, but a survey was not completed, so we've included that as a condition. So before an approved location can occur, it's going to have to be attended to by an Ontario land surveyor, and that's in the information and the conditions.
Can you clarify for me whether that means the lot already exists and then it's surveyed, or in order for the council to recommend that this is 8 lots, it has to be surveyed first?
Well, I believe, based on the information provided, that we have the ability to make a decision with respect to how the subdivision can go forward and under what conditions. Many lots on Wawashkash probably don't meet the flood elevation, if not all of the ones that were historically part of the lake's history. But we now have what I would call very high quality conditions to, in fact, implement the safety to persons and property with respect to any new development.
I'm not
First,
clear
that
on your
word
answer to my
By,
question.
your worship, with respect to that issue. And it's not my opinion, it's a collective view by the experts in the field.
My question is the survey done before we
No,
allow
no, the
lots or
survey
after?
has not been done, but each one of those lots will require that certification.
So after the fact.
Well, they'll be required to undertake a certification of the elevation of the installations, as does any construction now.
Okay, Mr. Jackson, have you or council seen any written comments from North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority?
Yes. Yes.
You've seen written comments, not just the meeting you had, you've had written comments from the authority,
We've had a number of exchanges.
written comments.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
They're not public.
Nothing that I believe is confidential. They were quite candid. Some of those exchanges were between the proponent and the authority. They may have some confidentiality to them, but I've seen them all. I don't think there's anything that's not available or couldn't be made available, but all of which ended up in the construction of the conditions attached to the draft approval.
So council has seen the written comments from North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority.
That I don't know whether there's been a bombardment of information, so I don't know exactly all the documents that council's been able to review.
Has North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority had the opportunity to review your latest report?
Yes, I
and
shared.
provided written comments to it.
I don't know that they responded, but we shared it with.
But they haven't responded yet?
I don't expect they will respond.
Okay, can we,
Thank you.
I might just ask a question, John, that's kind of a follow-up to the to this last comment. What if you have required as a condition of subsequently that the survey has to be done? What would happen if, for example, the survey reveals that on one of those lots, there is no elevation above 229.57? What would happen then?
It would have to be artificially raised. But that's not uncommon to import material.
Okay, well, questions from questions from council, are there other?
Mr. Mayor, if I might, do we have time to, after we come out of the committee of a whole, to ask her questions like we normally would? I know normally that's when we'd be asking our questions and not in the committee of a whole. I'm just wondering why we're doing it now.
You can ask
I
both times.
think that's the purpose of this part of the meeting, is my understanding.
Actually, you can ask questions both times.
Well, I mean, I guess you could if you want to, but
Well, I'll kick it off. The Perry Sound, this, of course, goes to the Perry Sound Planning Board, of which Councilor Nash and I sit on. Once the decision is made, John, under Bill 23, who can appeal this? Are there any parties that can appeal the decision, whatever it is?
The legislation changes have removed a lot of the appeal possibilities, so only specified persons can appeal. And the definitions in the Planning Act, but it really relates to more or less agencies like Hydro, Bell Telephone, gas utilities. So my understanding of the reform says that no one can really appeal other than specified persons, which are agencies or the actual applicant.
Okay.
But one may want to check with a solicitor, but that would be my interpretation.
So very limited, other than if it was turned down and Mr. Keene wanted to appeal it, then he could.
He
correct?
could.
Yeah.
And it's the same with consents. There are no longer appeals to approved or at least provisionally approved consents.
So when it comes to land, I don't know a whole heck of a lot, but I do know about high water marks and or high water levels. And I know no pins, or, you know, I think the Crown owns the land on up to the high water mark, if I'm not mistaken. Where's the high water mark on all these lots?
Well,
what would be the, first of all, am I right that, you know, if there's a high water mark, the Crown owns that?
Actually, there is a shore road allowance in front of this, which is
That was
part,
my next question. You're
is
ahead.
it's partly submerged. So a shore road allowance was actually part of the original survey instructions by the Crown for the geographic township of Mackenzie. And when the control dam was put in, it actually flooded in some cases that shore road allowance, so that in this case, I think about half of the road allowance is generally submerged. So 33 feet of it is above the summertime control, and 33 feet's out in the water. So persons can buy the shore road allowance with respect to that part that's above the control. So that if the lot owners or Mr. Keene himself wanted to buy that 33 feet that's above the control, he could. We wouldn't sell the stuff that of that portion of the road allowance that's out under the water. And then at the outer limit of that, that would be Crown Lake bed from pre-control dam days. It would tend to be a moot sort of issue in this case because our setback is 45 feet for all buildings and 100 feet for all septic systems. So
Does that include the shore road allowance? Even
Yes.
if it's not purchased?
yes, the land is land under the bylaws.
But the high water mark is what? Did I miss it? What is the
Well,
high water?
it would be at the control level of the dam. I may have it wrong. If it's 224.5 or it's 225, whatever that spillway is, elevation is.
Okay. There was a lot of talk about McCormick's Pond, and I know Mr. King doesn't want to hear about McCormick's Pond, but I'm gonna bring it up anyway. And, you know, when I was out there, there was lots of concerns from an environmental standpoint and the idea of docking or putting docks on McCormick's Pond. And that, you know, was pretty prevalent when we were out there. Because at times it's only a foot or two deep, I think. So, but yet, we continue in what you're proposing, if I've read it right, to allow docks to be put on McCormick's Pond. Is that correct? And if so, why? And why would we not restrict them? Because I think there's enough area for docks on the other side, which is the deeper water, et cetera. So can you address that, please?
Yeah, I would agree with that observation that we should not allow docks on the McCormick's ponds. I believe, I mean, when I went on the property, I know that you really couldn't get beyond a very long distance along that west shore without harming, in my view, with your watercraft, the sort of aquatic vegetation. So that to me is an area that obviously can't sustain traffic or docks for that matter. So I'd agree with that.
You're not a solicitor, but my last question is, if these lots are approved and sold and the new purchasers come to the municipality and say, I want to get or go to North Bay Mattawa and say, I want a septic, Because there's all kinds of septics. It doesn't have to be a class 4, right? You can have whatever. You can have just a tank that gets pumped out, right? And many other things, composting toilet, whatever.
Well, there are various types or classes of systems, and some of the tertiary systems have very minimal space requirements.
Okay,
So,
here's where I'm going, John. So someone comes in and says, I'm just gonna have a tank. But for some reason, there isn't enough room on the lot to put a building with setbacks, et cetera. How exposed would you feel the municipality is in that case? Where the planning board approves the lots, and now we're out 3 years and someone wants to build, and for some reason they're informed that they can't build. Does that expose us?
I don't believe it will, because what happens normally, I don't know if the chief building official is online or planning technician, but the solicitor for a purchaser consults with the municipality about any regulations with respect to placing a dwelling or infrastructure on a lot. And they usually turn them to the zoning bylaw and the subdivision agreement, which will be registered on title. So that full disclosure would be the responsibility of the reporting lawyer to the prospective purchaser. That's the process that's in place.
Okay, here's my final question. If we go with 229.57 and 224 or 227, how does that affect all the other lots on Wawashkesh who want to replace their septic systems?
Well, this would
I'm
only,
sure there's a lot that don't meet that criteria, an awful lot. So are we now setting policy for the entire lake that when their septic fails and they go to have it replaced, they say, nope, can't do it because you don't have the land, or you got to build it up or whatever? Is this something that's going to affect dozens and dozens of people?
no, this will only apply to the land that is subject to the subdivision.
What makes you say that? I mean, I know you can say it, but I mean, on what basis do you say that?
All of the other properties that have been developed are sort of grandfathered with respect to the new rules. So when the new rules come in, they can only apply to new developments. So building, yes, they can be required to comply with the zoning bylaw. But in terms of the wastewater issue for all the lots that exist, whether or not they're at or close or over the flood elevation that we're imposing with respect to septic tank and tile field requirements, will only apply to the subdivision. It will not affect other properties on the lake.
Okay, thank you.
Would you not agree that, John, that that's until those other properties need to replace their septic systems?
Yeah,
Then they're compliant, then they've got to comply with the regulations as they exist now, right?
That was my question.
Well, I think is an interesting application on Wawashkesh by the local authority. And they look at things from a very practical perspective. In new development, it's a different kind of animal, but my sense was from my multiple meetings with the approval authority is that they may not have had historically given the flood elevation consideration sort of the highest regard, but they felt confident with the approvals that were given. Would they hold them to an Ontario land surveyor? I suspect not, but they could. But in this case, we're making it very clear that anybody that is going to develop on these, construct on these lots, they have to go through this criteria process. Because this evolved as an issue, and this will satisfy it.
Okay, thank you. Did you finish your questions, Councillor?
I'm done for now.
Councillor Nash.
I just had a really quick question as a follow-up to the comment that was just done there from John Jackson. And if I get it correctly, what you're saying, John, is that we're going to treat these new lots to a higher standard than any other lot that's on the lake that might be grandfathered in. So we're going to hold these lots to a higher standard for a new septic system, even if an old septic system fails on the lake, they might not be held to that same standard. But because this is a new subdivision, we're going to ask for something over and above what we normally would to try to satisfy some concerns that we've heard from the public in regards to the septic system. So a way to help with that, we're going to put a condition only on this subdivision. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's actually not true. Then if you have to, the code is very specific. With repair, okay, I'll shut up. With repairs, you have to comply. Yeah, that's.
Yeah. The same as the electrical building code or anything. If you do it, you have to bring it up to current code.
That's my information too. I don't.
I do have just one question for Mr. Jackson, if I could. Mr. Jackson, in your report, you stated the leaching bed as low as 224, which is below the level of the dam at any time. So, and in the past 9 years, the level of 227 that Mr. Keene mentioned that he could do, it is flooded 9 times in 9 years. So are you prepared to stand by that 224 number, knowing that it floods every year above that level? And it's flooded above the 227 9 times in 9 years.
I think I would agree that's a typo, Your Worship, through you. I think we could certainly increase that level to above my mistaken number of 224. I think the elevation might be 225, but if we went to 226 or 227, it sounds like the general installation 30 meters back of tile fields is going to be at that level anyway. So I don't think that's a hardship to make that correction. We will make that correction.
Thank you.
So I think it matters though what you would change it to. It's the sill height of the dam is 225 meters in round numbers. The normal freshet in the spring is, I would say 2 to 3 meters. So that would bring you up to 228. We're talking about a flooding, to get back to this definition of what do we mean by subject to flooding? That would cause it, if you put something below 228, it's going to cause it to be flooded virtually every year or every couple of years.
Yeah, so I relied on our engineer to advise on that, and his opinion was that as long as it was above the summertime level, so 225, but I don't see why there would be an issue to go to say 227, for example, because his conclusion was that it would not harm the ultimate functioning of the bed, because during that freshet period, there's very few people that would be operating those systems. Well, they wouldn't be operable.
Okay. Is there anything else that we need to do in committee of the whole? Oh, Councillor Bray, we haven't heard from you yet, or Councillor Woods for that matter. I guess we haven't heard. You have questions you want to ask?
Yes, I do have, Mr. Mayor, a question on lot 1 and 2 are the two that, when I look at the diagram that we received, I see that there, lot 1 goes quite a ways back. Lot 2, I'm not sure where the end of the lot is. That makes that 3.6 hectares with the water edge line in there, and then the original high water further down. I'm not sure which one we're looking at. And to me, lot 2 is right on the environment, the EP zone, and I'm just wondering if there's whether that's a real viable lot being so close. And I'm sure that the water in the spring comes up that far, maybe not in the dry season, but anyways, if I wasn't quite sure of the size.
So through your worship, I'm looking at the red line plan. Is Councillor Bray looking at that?
Yeah, yes, I am, John.
Okay. And so the new sort of lots 1, 2, and 3 now would be formed by the middle, basically splitting half of lot 2 with 3 and half of the south half of lot 2 with 1.
Okay. And so when you're saying how large they are, is that including how far does it go back? Right to the original high water line?
It would go back to the yes, the original high water mark. That's right. Those areas were more or less part of the survey draft plan provided by.
And so anyone who was who maybe purchased a lot would be able to, like, if they couldn't have a traditional septic with a septic bed, would be able to look at the other alternatives. I mean, they may be, some of them may be more expensive, some will be less expensive, but, and then if they had, say, like a composting toilet, they would have to have then for sure a gray water system. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
If they had pressurized water is the way the rules work, as I understand them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's good to know.
And
So there are options for people if they do for these lots, if they cannot use a regular septic system.
yeah, if it's a regular tile field which can consume several thousand square feet, they can go to a tertiary system that is several hundred square feet. So they can occupy a very small fraction of what we would normally see in a septic tile field.
And with the Mattawa Conservation Authority, do they determine how, depending on what the size of the building, do they determine how big the field has to be and all those kinds of things?
Yes, and that's prescribed in the building code as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I had to ask these questions, but I don't understand it all very well yet. So I sometimes have to ask very basic things. Thank you.
No worries.
Councillor Woods, did you have any questions or comments that you want to at this point? Okay. All right.
Someone's got their hands up, 2 people.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it's Helen Malaby Hicks. I'd really appreciate an opportunity to ask a question.
Okay, if it's a question, yes, go ahead, Helen.
So just a point of clarification, Jackson says that flooding, spring freshet flooding isn't an issue because it happens when no one's there. That is incorrect. It happens over the May 24 weekend, and that is when our lake is at high capacity. Most cottage owners are in their cottages on the 24th of May weekend. So flooding of septics at that time would be a serious issue. And as you can see from that Hobo link graph, that happens regularly, annually at least. Secondly, my question is that Jackson refers to some engineer report, his engineer report. However, he has not provided any evidence of this report. So can he provide evidence of this report? Can he provide this report? Because I think it would help us because we obviously have an independent engineer who has been very clear that septics should not be placed in areas that flood. And now Jackson has admitted he's got a typo in his report of 224.5 meters And then now he's guessing maybe 225, maybe 226, maybe 227, depends how much flooding we want of the septics. He's also said that no problem for those low-lying lots. They can build up the septic with fill. But I'm concerned that those low-lying lots are so low, as we can see in the graphs and in the diagrams, they flood. So that fill will be flooding, and that will be flooding into an environmentally protected area. It will be flooding into McCormick's Pond, plus it'll be flooding on the shorelines, on the east shoreline of the subdivision. And as far as I understand it, and according to the environmental report, you're not allowed to bring in fill onto a shoreline. So I'm concerned that these environmental rules are not being adhered to. So my question for Jackson is, can he provide the evidence of this engineer's report that he refers to? And can you provide evidence, written evidence, that North Bay Mattawa Conservation Area Association has agreed to this? Because you've talked about 224 meters, then you've said 225, 226, 227. What level has North Bay Mattawa Conservation Area Association actually said that the leaching bed should be placed above? And please can you provide any written evidence of this? Because so far, no one has provided any written evidence. Things have been waved around, letters from North Bay Mattawa, and you've made.
Okay, the question is on the floor. Helen, John, do you want to answer it, please?
Just going to answer it this way, Your Worship, that the conditions in the draft plan represent the recommendations of the planning board's engineer. Thank you.
Sounds like an obfuscation, and
Okay, thank you.
like the evidence.
All right. Any,
I just have a really quick question when we're still in the committee of a whole, for one question. And I'm just curious as a new counselor, actually, how a lot of these things go. And I know we've heard from a lot of people on the Wawashkesh Task Force, and I think comments are always good overall. And I believe there's a PAD committee, if I have it right, planning and development, if I have it right. So I'm just wondering, and this might not be the time, but I'm hoping you guys might want to answer it, if Mayor, you'd allow them to. And really, it just comes down to, as a lake association, I know that you guys have hired a consultant and have written letters of opposition to this. And I'm just wondering how that comes to be, if you guys had a special meeting of the membership to vote on this, to get the support of the majority of the association, or how that goes, just so I can better understand it. And then the second part to that is simply, I'm just curious how many members. I know there's a lot of members, and I think it's the biggest lake association in the area. So I'm just more curious how many people are roughly, or properties are members, not people, but properties. I don't know if that can be answered, just to give me a little background.
I have asked the question back.
I think I'm the one asking the questions, but I think it gives great information to council to know if there was a vote on this from the membership, if there was one put out to the membership on it, and how many members are part of the association. I don't think it's a hard question to ask, but if you don't want to answer it, that's fine, no problem.
Sorry, if you want to answer it, you need to use the mic. You don't have to answer it. It's not. But if you do, please use the mic.
I can't remember if you were at our AGM.
No,
Scott, no. So at our AGM, we had this on our AGM as an agenda item, and the PAD committee addressed what they were putting forward on this issue and the progress we were making. We have sent out updates all along to our membership as to what we are doing on this issue and other issues on the lake. We have a board of directors, which has been elected in order to deal with board issues or issues representing the lake, and that is the idea of the board. We had 100 and some members, 134 members, I think, last year. Is that it? Anything else, or did I leave something out?
That was perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see Kathy Ducar. Do you have your hand up or?
Yes, I do.
Okay, do you have a question?
Helen asked this, but I really didn't hear an answer from Mr. Jackson. So I'd like to go back to the issue of that the septic beds are assumed to be safe because they're not being used in periods of high occupancy. But you can see from the graph that both in the spring and in the fall, at the time of the May 2-4 weekend and Thanksgiving, which are, as you know, the highest level of occupancy of all cottages on the lake, those septic beds would be underwater by several meters routinely. So could you comment on that and why you think that's appropriate?
That question is to you, John, I think.
Again, we relied on the engineers that were retained to examine it. And together, that was the answer provided. And so I can only take the opinion of the professionals around us. So I'm not trying to be avoiding the answer, but those are where those technical pieces come from.
And do you think that if they had the data from the Hobo Link graphs that we're presenting here today, they would maintain those positions?
I believe so. I think we shared that with you.
Despite the fact that those buildings are being highly used and the septic beds will flood and their waste systems will not operate, as you recently just stated.
Well, again, I relied on that information. I'm not an engineer or an expert in that field. So we relied on the technical people that were providing us that advice.
I see. Well, our engineer that we hired has provided the advice that that level is way too low.
Shared that with our engineer.
I hope he will change his mind. Thank you.
He disagrees with their opinion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Woods.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask if Jackson says his engineer disappears with disagrees with the opinion, why he will not share the engineer's report that he has?
Sorry, I didn't recognize you, Helen. You need to, there's somebody else who was trying to get in here, but I think they're sorry, wind stops. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Hi.
You have a question?
Can you hear me? Yeah, my question is a simple one, whether the engineer that said that the level was okay knew that it floods over 2 to 3 meters above the level of the dam, or did they think it was like Almec Lake where the level of the dam is the level of the water?
Is that a question?
That's a question, yes, John.
Yeah, that's the question. That's sort of the basic question. Did the engineer understand what this lake is like? That it goes up 3 meters above the dam and sometimes more? Or did they think it was like Almec, where it's the level of the dam at all the time?
Oh, okay, I just wondered whether it was a question to me, and the answer is yes, the engineer knows the background.
Okay, thanks. I think it's time for us to. Sorry?
9:30, I think we get out of.
Would you like to move? Yeah.
We've got one more item, right?
Well, we do. Hopefully this one isn't as complicated, let's say. Thank you, everybody. If I could get a motion to reconvene
No, we have to deal with one more planning.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're absolutely correct. Yes, we still one more. This is item 5.2, which is the passing of a deeming bylaw relating to some, relating to a property that is owned by the Bennett's, not the ones that are in Bennett's Bay, but the ones that were getting a small addition to their property from Mr. Merritt's property. So once again, I'm going to ask John Jackson if he would like to introduce us.
One of the requirements under the Planning Act is that any lot in the plan of subdivision can be sold at any time because it is a lot in the plan of subdivision, which means that it was reviewed in some planning context historically. In some cases, though, and in this case, as an example, the Bennett's have a lot in the plan of subdivision, but they're getting an addition from a neighboring property. One of the conditions on that approval was that it merge with the lot of the Bennett's, which is a lot in the plan of subdivision. So we have to remove that status. And so that's done through a deeming bylaw. It's a very simple one-line type bylaw that simply says lot such and such and plan M such and such is deemed to no longer be a lot, so that when the property that they've acquired from their adjacent property owner is added, without that status, they automatically merge under the Planning Act by registering them in the same name. So this is a purely technical step in fulfilling that condition requiring the merging of the two parcels.
And that was a condition that council put on the approval of these lot additions in the first place. So are there any questions for Mr. Jackson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I might, I just have one really quick question. I had staff provide me with the report from last year in regards to, I think, the other section of these lots. So if I'm understanding correct, I think I think I get it, that there was an application that was numbered B45-2022 under Gary Merritt. And there's a new application by the Bennett's. And basically, this new application is only to fulfill a condition under the B45-2022. So they just had to do another application just in order to satisfy one of the conditions that was put on to the Merritt application as part of the planning board resolution back in September of 2022. Am I correct?
That's right.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, if there are no further questions, now I believe we can entertain a motion to reconvene to regular session. Councillor Lamb moves, seconded by Councillor Woods. The council reconvene into a regular meeting at, we'll call it 9:31. Okay, we have been asked, well, sorry, let's approve the motion first. Can I have a show of hands first, please? All right, now take a break by all means.
My computer lasted longer than I thought it was going to. Yeah.
Curfew is 3.5 hours. That's 10 o'clock, isn't it?
Is that this one?
We started at 6:30.
I paid for this, I put a loan or something in down. So I don't know. So we already have the survey done. Yeah, it's certain, like all the top lines are. You wanna know the elevation. Here. I have it there.
Anyway.
Okay, folks, the break is over. Could we reconvene, please?
Oh, you found it. I found it. What I had to, I found it on my phone. And
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay, matters arising from the committee of the whole. There is a fairly lengthy motion here, which has been suggested, which I'm going to read to you and see if somebody wants to move it. Whereas John Jackson Planner Incorporated has prepared a report for the Parry Sound Area Planning Board regarding subdivision application S01/2022 Whitestone, the applicant being STO Network Consulting Incorporated, dated February 13th, 2023, and that's the date of the report, and provided a copy to the municipality of Whitestone. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone receives this report for information, and that the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone recommends the subdivision application for approval in principle, inclusive of all conditions as recommended in the above referenced report as follows, and there are 9 of them. And you've seen them all before. That this approval applies to the draft plan prepared by David Comery, not spelled differently from my name, Ontario Land Survey dated April 26, 2022, as amended, which shows 8 single detached seasonal residential lots. 2, that the owners convey up to 5% of land included in the draft plan to the municipality of Whitestone for park purposes. Alternatively, the municipality of Whitestone may require cash in lieu of a parkland dedication. 3, that the owner agrees to in writing to satisfy all requirements, financial and otherwise, of the municipality of Whitestone concerning the provision of services and drainage, if applicable. 4, that the lots be assigned to a mainland parking location using a section 118 land titles restriction that requires that any transferable lot include the assigned mainland parking area. That such easements as may be required for utility or drainage purposes shall be granted to the appropriate authority. That's number 5. Number 6, that the owner enters into a subdivision agreement with the municipality of Whitestone and that said agreement be registered against the land to which it applies. 7, that the subdivision agreement between the owner and the municipality of Whitestone includes the requirement that septic system installations include the following requirements. That the location of any septic tanks be sited such that its openings are at or above an elevation of 229.57 meters above sea level to be certified by an Ontario land surveyor. And B, drainage of field beds are located at or above. And there's a number here, but we had a discussion. It's right now it reads 224.5 meters above sea level, which is presumably has to be changed. Number 8, that the subdivision agreement between the subdivided. Sorry, I think that's the subdivided lots maybe. And the municipality of Whitestone include a notice. Am I right?
Subdivider,
Oh, subdivider. Okay, thank you.
sorry.
And the municipality of Whitestone include a notice as follows. That any agreements of purchase and sale include a notice to advise owners that prior to any construction taking place on the lands, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks be consulted to confirm whether a permit is required under the Endangered Species Act. And 9, the applicant will ensure that 911 addressing is in place on each of the lots. So that's the motion, quite lengthy. Does someone wish to move it? Councillor Woods is moving it. Let me get the motion page. Is there a seconder? Councillor Nash. Okay, the floor is open for discussion. This time only by councillors. I mean, perhaps maybe what I should do is ask the question at the beginning. Can we get a consensus on what that number should be under 7B that it was 224.5?
227.
That needs changed.
Hmm?
That number needs changed, my opinion.
Do we know what the top of the dam elevation is?
It's 225 in round numbers.
So could we say top of dam? If we just say top of dam, that would probably.
I think Mr. Keene has already offered 227, so, you know.
If I may speak, 227, if you look at the overall, seems like a number that is safely out of the pressure. There may happen on the odd occasion, but 227 seems to me, and I think Mr. Jackson said so. If you look at that graph,
It's not, this is
9 years at 227. So 227, and you're okay with the septic fields flooding every year, go with 227. It's pretty clear from the graph. Sorry, I will.
Well, okay, I guess we can. Hmm? I don't know. I suppose we can ask if he has an opinion, since this is, I guess, basically his report. Would
I think 227 is certainly, I very much believe that's a responsible number that would be likely recognized by what the contractors do now. And as Mr. Keene has suggested, I'd say put that number in, which would give you, I would think, pretty good assurances. So I was inserted 227.
Well, okay, just to clarify what's on the floor, did the mover and seconder want 227? Is that what you want? Sorry, was that a yes or?
That's fine with me.
Here's, I saw the mover.
Works for me.
All right. All right, so.
I'd also put a condition, sorry. Can I go? Sorry.
You may go.
Okay, sorry.
Councillor Lamb.
I'd also like to put a condition in about no docks on McCormick's Pond.
So would that be number 10?
I guess so.
No docks be permitted on, well, again. permitted fronting on McCormick's Pond. McCormick's Pond. Once again, I'll ask if the mover and seconder are okay with adding that, or do you want an amendment for that?
I have a question about it.
Okay, so Councillor Lamb, you're going to propose that as an amendment, are you?
Yeah.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? All right, I'll second it. Because I feel pretty strongly that that's a requirement, yeah. And so let's, the amendment is moved and seconded. Is there a, you had a question about it, Councillor Woods?
I just have a question. I mean, we all know that McCormick's Pond gets really, really shallow. When we went out on the boat tour, everybody was good enough to really show us every spot that was of concern on the lake, which I really appreciated. McCormick's Pond, to me, from everything that I've heard, it's not necessarily a floating dock that would be a problem. It's boat traffic, especially motorized boat traffic. And at some point, if we could, I don't know how we do this, but we should have a rule saying that you can't go anywhere near there with a motorized boat, period. If someone went in with a canoe, I don't see that as an issue. I mean, I've canoed through 8 inches of water. I canoed up here my entire life. That's all we ever did was going backpacking and canoeing and portaging, right? It's motorized boats that are the problem. They rip up the bottom when you get somewhere shallow. They destroy, spawning beds. They destroy all the vegetation in the shallow areas. That's the issue, right? It's not a floating dock. Floating docks don't do anything wrong to fish habitat. They provide more habitat for the fish, and that's a fact, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can say that no docks on that side, but I don't think anybody in their right mind would want to put one there or should put a motorized boat in there. That's all I'm gonna say about it.
So I'll tell you what my answer is. The reason I don't think there should be any docks there is that the minute you have docks there, you will have people raising it for their motorized boats, right? And I don't disagree with anything else you said. I just think that's a concern that what will happen now is you'll have people using the docks and they'll be driving the big boats in and they'll be chewing up the bottom. It's just a mud bottom, so. But anyway, I don't know. We have to vote on the amendment. It's well, sorry, did you want to speak to the amendment?
Yeah, I have a question if I could to John Jackson. Is he still on the line?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, perfect. Under our zoning bylaw, are you allowed to have a floating dock in an environmentally protected area?
Yes.
Okay.
I tend to agree, your worship, though, with Brian, Councillor Woods, and yourself, that we can't control navigation, but we can control dock structures. And I think if I could offer my opinion that the attraction of a dock brings on the navigation by motorized vehicles, so I tend to agree that it's not a bad condition for McCormick Pond's health and welfare. I'd written it down earlier as a condition anyway, so I agree with Councillor Lamb.
Anyone else wish to speak to the amendment? Okay, I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor, please indicate. It looks like 4 people in favor, so at least, so that now becomes part of the number 10, no docks. The condition is that no docks be permitted fronting on McCormick's Pond is now part of the motion. All right, now can we go back to any discussion of the motion itself?
If I might, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a couple amendment suggestions if I could.
Well, I think Councillor Bray had, no, all right, go ahead.
I just would make a proposal under item number 5. It reads that such easements as may be required for utility or drainage purposes shall be granted to the appropriate authority. I know I placed a phone call to our planner earlier today. And if I'm correct, this is an island. So easements for utilities would make sense, but not for drainage because there is no storm sewer systems. So I don't think that needs to be there and should just be scratched off. I know that's what you'd normally have for a plan of subdivision in a municipality, but not for an island property. So John, if I, just before I propose a motion, if you could just maybe comment on that to me, just to make sure I had it understanding correct.
I think you've described it correctly, that this is a wording that we would typically just automatically insert in any subdivision, but a water access here, single tier, isn't going to require a drainage easement, hydrant one perhaps, or bell, but not drainage. So you could remove the words or drainage, I think is a good suggestion.
Okay, thanks, John. So that would be my my proposed amendment, just to take out of item number 5, the word or drainage.
Does anyone wish to dispute that amendment, or could it be? I'm not hearing anybody say no, so we'll take out the words or drainage. So it's just for utility purposes then.
Yeah.
All right.
And sorry if I might.
You had another one?
Yeah, I had 2 other small ones. And I'm going to ask John a question first, just to make sure I understand it correct. Item number 3, it says that the owners agree in writing to satisfy all requirements, financial and otherwise, of the municipality of Whitestone concerning the provision of services and drainage, if applicable. And I think we just answered it, that drainage is not applicable and there's no extension of services to the subdivision because there is no water, sewer, roads, municipal services. So as such, I think when we spoke earlier, I don't believe item number 3 should be in here, and it's just standard for a normal subdivision, which isn't on an island and would have extension of municipal services. So I would, my proposal would be, if I'm correct, John, would be to eliminate item number 3 because it's.
I don't think, if I could, your worship, just I'd be okay with removing and drainage the way we did on number 5, but for example, let's say that we needed an easement for Hydro 1 and we have to engage a lawyer on behalf of municipality. So that might be a financial requirement that I think we want to capture. So I could be happy, I'd be very comfortable removing and drainage, but I don't know that I really want to ditch the whole condition. Just in case, in the practical sense, it's unlikely to generate any substantial cost to the applicant. But I think it's a condition that may be triggered, but not likely. So I'd be much more comfortable, through you, your worship, to Councillor Nash, to make it that similar change, but leave the condition there.
Okay, so that would, thanks, John. So based on that, it would be removing the word
Or drainage.
and drainage.
Yes.
So is everybody okay with that? Removing it and drainage from number 3. All right, it's gone.
Yeah, thank you. And then, sorry to keep it going, the final one was item number 8. And I had, again, a discussion with John Jackson earlier today about it. Right now, I'll just read the part in quotations. It says that any agreement of purchase and sale include a notice to advise owners that prior to any construction taking place on the lands, that the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, MECP, be consulted to confirm whether a permit is required under the Endangered Species Act. And what I'd propose to amend that with is that any agreement of purchase and sale include a notice on title to advise owners in perpetuity that requirements under the Endangered Species Act are to be followed. So again, I'll read that out again. That any agreement of purchase and sale include a notice on title to advise owners in perpetuity that requirements under the Endangered Species Act are to be followed.
Okay, so I guess there are two pieces to what you're suggesting. One is the owners in perpetuity. The second part is, I'm not sure why you reverted the second part.
I feel it reads better. And when I said requirements under the Endangered Species Act are to be followed, part of the discussion I had with our planner, right now it says Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, MECP. That can change. It might go back to MNRF like it was before. So if you just say requirements under the Endangered Species Act are to be followed, I think it's a more blanketing statement. Just as doesn't matter if you're doing, it says here that prior to any construction, those construction development, it just simply says, you know, again, that any requirements of purchase and sale include a notice on title to advise owners in perpetuity that requirements under the Endangered Species Act are to be followed. Basically, what I was getting at is make sure to follow the Endangered Species Act, plain and simple. Just make it very simple to the point and say, it's on title, you guys better follow it.
Okay, do you have any comments, John?
I think the import is identical with either wording, so I'm happy with that change, Your Worship. It's Councillor Nash is being technically correct and kind of covering sort of the moving processes that are involved in that legislation. He's basically saying you must, it almost goes without saying because everyone is subject to the legislation and complying with it. So I'm okay with that. They're identical in their intent.
All right, so. Yeah. Yeah, just there's still an issue with the wording. I'm sorry, you inserted the words on title. Okay, notice of purchase and sale is not on title. Right? Do you mean a notice on title? Then it's not an agreement of purchase and sale. It's something that's registered on title.
You know, what I have right now, I'll reread it, that any, or let me know, that any agreement of purchase and sale include a notice on title to advise owners in perpetuity that requirements under the Endangered Species Act are to be followed.
Okay, but the subdivision, just so we're clear, the subdivision agreement is registered on title, correct, John?
Correct.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
And
so you're not putting the notice on title, you're putting the notice in an offer of purchase and sale, which is a separate legal document, right?
Yeah, I know that, Mr. Mayor. It would be that as part of the purchase and sale, there's a condition in the purchase and sale that says there'll be a notice added to the title, an instrument to advise the owners in perpetuity that requirements are to be followed. So as part of the purchase and sale, there'll be a little clause that says the prospective owners are aware that there's going to be an item registered on title as an instrument, not as a 5126, just there'll be an instrument inserted on title that'll be there for perpetuity for owners.
But the 5126 is registered on title, so
But this isn't this isn't a 5126 agreement. This is simply saying.
So what it is it then? I don't understand. I'm sorry.
I think if I can offer this up, I think that the words on title is extraneous because, Your Worship, you're right. The 5126 is registered on title, which means it automatically flows in perpetuity. So you don't really need notice on title in perpetuity reference there because the 5126 is an in perpetuity document. It never is expunged. It just carries on the title of the property. So there's a couple of extraneous words there.
Okay, so I don't know. Do we need this to be
Better pass curfew.
Yeah, well. We're in the middle of dealing with an item. Do we need this to be an amendment? All right, well. I will just take a pause then, because it's gonna take a few minutes. Let's see if I can find the curfew bylaw. Emotion. Okay, can I get a mover and seconder, please? The council hereby continues its council meeting past the allotted time of 3.5 hours and continue for an additional 1/2 hour. Councillor Woods moves. Councillor Lamb seconds. All those in favor of extending curfew. Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Now going back to, I'm going to read the amendment. The proposed amendment. That it is to item 8 that the notice as follows, and it's in quotations, reads that any agreements of purchase and sale include a notice to advise owners in perpetuity that prior to any construction, prior to any construction taking place on the lands, the provisions of the Endangered Species Act must be followed. Is that what you want?
No, I'll reread it again. I've taken out a word based on John's. That any agreements of purchase and sale include a notice to advise owners that requirements under the Endangered Species Act are to be followed. I'll read that again. That any agreements of purchase and sale include a notice to advise owners that requirements under the Endangered Species Act are to be followed. That would be end of quotations. And what I did was I just took out the on title and the word in perpetuity based on what John had said. So those two.
Okay, so you don't want in perpetuity either. All right, that's fine. Okay, include a notice to.
Yeah. Want me to read it
To
again?
advise the owners, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that any agreements of purchase and sale include a notice
Yeah, to advise
to
owners.
advise owners that requirements
Yeah, okay.
under the Endangered Species Act are to be followed.
Under the Endangered Species
Are to be followed.
Species Act are to be followed.
Thank you.
All right, okay, so that's the amendment. Any is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Councillor Woods, so. Any further discussion of that amendment? Okay, all those in favor of the amendment? 1, 2, 3. Councillor Lamb, are you in favor of the amendment?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
All right, thank you. That's carried. All right, and we still have the main motion as amended. Are there, Councillor Ray, you had a question, correct? Did you or no?
No, it got answered or got the change put in. That's what I was finding.
Okay, does anyone wish to speak further to this motion?
I just have a really quick question. It's not on the motion, but it is. And I'd spoken to our planner earlier today, and at the top of the reports on 5.1.2, there are some dates that were showing. One of them was the lapsing date. Another one is date of decision and last date of appeal. And from what I understand from John, those are going to be updated based on when a decision is done. So what we see in our packages is just a draft and not the final dates. And And the second part to that question is simply on page 19 of 78, the motion that you've just read out is one part, but there's a second part, which is notes to draft approval. And I'm just wondering, is that what's taken up at the planning board section of this, John?
Yeah, so if I may, your worship, through you, all those dates will be brought up to current status, including the decision lapsing, et cetera. And the notes are kind of a technical package simply for the owners to know that there are some administrative things that they have to accomplish.
Yeah, so under item number 3 of notes to draft approval, it says clearances are required for the following agencies: clerk, municipality of Whitestone. I would assume that's referring to items 2 through 9, if I'm correct. I think we added one, or 2 through 10. Would I be correct?
Yeah, so we would update that.
Okay, perfect. That's all I wanted to know. That was my question. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, are there any other comments that people want to make about this? Councillor Lamb?
Yeah. Long journey, but I can tell you that when I look at the studies and all the information, I, like Councillor Bray, have a concern about lot 2. From what I can see here, I don't see a buildable lot. I think that there are, 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. I think there's an envelope to build and put a septic. I guess one could question 1 and 3, but 2 sort of bothers me. Is it a game changer that wouldn't get my approval? I don't know, but is there any way that I just feel the 8-lot subdivision for practical reasons could easily be 7 by combining 2 into 1 or 3 or something. And I just don't see a building envelope. It's underwater and at certain times of the year, and to bring in soil for a septic, I guess you can do it. It's problematic if that's a problem for me. So John or the rest of council, get me over that hump, please. On lot 2, someone help me.
If I could
Go
offer,
ahead, John.
the only thing I might offer is that when we encompassed the reconfigured lot, we brought in some slightly higher area on the lot. So the question that you're asking is, is there a sufficient area that's above an elevation that would make that lot viable? I think the condition will ensure that. You may want to pull that lot aside and say that perhaps that it be certified as part of the approval. That is something that, if it is really uncomfortable with you, that could be addressed.
Give me that again. What would you do? What are you suggesting?
That the proposed revised or reconfigured lot 2, this would be adding a condition, be confirmed by Ontario Land Surveyor what areas are available above the flood elevation on that reconfigured lot.
Okay.
So I guess I would go farther than Councillor Lamb has gone. And let me tell you how I see this, and I mean, it's unfortunate. I believe that we've gone through the process we have to get to here, but the reality is, based on the information that I have in front of me, I'm pretty confident that there are 4 lots, and it's the ones at the east end, which would be 5, 6, 7, and 8 on this numbering system, on this 8-lot numbering system. I'm pretty sure that those ones are what I would describe as buildable. And buildable to me means that there is, when you take into consideration any setbacks that are necessary, and the elevation of the contour of the land from an elevation point of view, and the ability to locate docks on the Wawashish side of it, not the McCormick's Pond side of it, and all of that, I don't think there's any issue with those 4 lots. But unfortunately, the other 4, numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, based on the information that's in front of me, I am not confident that there is a suitable place to build and put a septic system at the elevations that are required for the building and the septic system. I'm not convinced that there's enough property with the setbacks that isn't actually flooded on a regular basis. And so, I mean, the council has heard before from the former council, one of our councilors recounted a situation that I've seen where you could in fact run about from the Wawashish side right through into McCormick's Pond, and it would be approximately, my best guess would be it's about where lot 2 is, but you know, I feel we're in a difficult situation here, because the problem is we're being asked to approve a plan of subdivision. So once we do that, or to recommend approval, planning board's in the approval agency, but once they prove it, the lots are created. The surveyor is going to come in and is going to survey them. That's a condition. Well, what if we discover, in fact, at that point that it's really not buildable? There isn't a suitable location there. And I'm concerned with that possibility. And I don't accept the arguments that, oh, well, you could always do something, you could fill it up, or you could do some kind of this is not the place to be doing that, those kind of maneuvers. So you know, and look, if we had the results of the survey and we had a proper contour plan that showed that there was such buildable, then my concern would go away. I would say, yeah, obviously there's a place to put it. But that information is not in front of me. And so I have a problem just approving it holus bolus. And I wish there was a mechanism that we could use that would say, fine, 4 lots, no issue, but we want to see the data for the other 4. We want the planning board to see the data for the other 4, so we know, in fact, whether it's good to go or not. And my concern is, frankly, that if it turns out that these lots are not buildable, and somebody will still buy them, and then down the road, the municipality will be stuck with the problem of trying to figure out, okay, people come and say, well, I bought a lot, you created it in good faith, you need to give me a building permit, and our building official, or you, North Bay Mattawa, need to give me a septic permit, and they're saying, well, sorry, no, that doesn't, we don't see any way you can, there may not even be enough property to do some of these, really compact solutions. There might be, I don't know, but this kind of information comes as a result of having engineered site plans up front. And when you don't, do we need to do them on most pieces of property? No, I mean, it's, you can tell, right? There's always gonna be someplace to put a, to put a septic bed on the average piece of property, but on some of these ones, this is not an average piece of property. It's environmentally sensitive in a lot of ways. And it's low lying. And so I don't know what we do, and I don't know, John, if you have any suggestions as a way, like I really sympathetic to Mr. Keen and the fact that this is dragging on and on and on and on. But this is all stuff that, in my opinion, we should have insisted on before the plan, the application was deemed complete, before we ever had a public meeting. And so, you know, it's, if we had that, I could look at it and say, yeah, you know what, lot 2 is no good. We gotta merge it with something else or get rid of it or whatever. We could figure out what we need to do. But right now, we don't know what we need to do. And I'm reluctant to just approve it holus bolus and have it go forward. So that's where I'm at. And I don't know, I don't know that we can do it as a condition unless John, are you still there? Unless you have some I don't even see him if he's still here. Unless he has a suggestion from a procedural point of view. He's gone, right?
They went to bed.
Well, you know, the last thing I want to do is just suggest that we defer this for another time, but I don't know. I mean, getting the information that we need is not a quick thing to do. I fully understand that. Have to wait till after the snow is gone and the water level's gone down to a decent level before you can, and then you have to try and get a surveyor to come out and you do it, but. If your comment is that is an acceptable elevation map, I'm sorry, it isn't. It wasn't ground proofed. It's taken from aerial photographs and stuff.
That's what was the farmer did in July. They paid $3,000. What more can I do?
Well, if you look at the, but you're looking for 229.57, there's not a lot of space above that on some of those lots, right? You're gonna build a cottage on it? You're gonna build a septic bed and put it. What about?
Can I speak now, Mr. Mayor?
Sorry, I'm not.
Yeah, yeah.
I know this is a big topic overall for the municipality and a lot of people on the lake. Do we have John back? No, right? But from what
Can you text him?
from what I understand, as part of the provincial policy statement, a septic system is not a requirement of lot creation. I'm going to repeat, is not a condition of the creation of a lot based on the provincial policy statement. If somebody wants to create a lot that's can't be built on, myself, I would say it's a poor business decision, but somebody is entitled to create that lot. And until such time that there's a building permit and a septic permit, you couldn't build. But there's other means to it. There's privies, there's compostable toilets. Somebody might choose to sell that property if it couldn't be built on. And I'm not saying that's the case, for a cheaper rate, and it might be used for somebody to camp on once a year, or somebody just use as a, I'm going to use the word a bird sanctuary, whatever it might be. But the creation of a lot is not defined by the requirement of a septic system. And further to that, I think we also have to be really cognizant of with, what am I trying to say here? Yeah, thank you. The building permit itself is only subject to the septic approval. And I believe a real estate lawyer would be one that would have to oversee, you know, as a purchaser, to make sure what can be done and can't be done. It's not up to council. We're not liable. That's up to whoever's purchasing the land, whoever's selling the land. We just create a lot or don't create a lot, whatever it might be. But it's based on what is the provincial policy statement says. And to hold somebody back because you might not be able to put a septic on a certain amount, somebody wants to create it and sell it to somebody for $1, they'd be able to do that. But I do think we also have to remember what I was trying to think a minute ago. On that lake, lots of buildings are built. I know there's some poor examples of it on stilts, which are 10 meters up in the air. But can you build and have stilts or a foundation piers, I'll call it, that are a meter high on a couple spots? Yes. Are you allowed under hazard lands to fill and create break walls? Yes, it's right in our official plan. I'm not saying that would be the number one thing I would do, but we're able to do it. And if we end up turning something down, this is my opinion, and the applicant goes to the OLT and appeals it, there's not a ground based on the provincial policy statements that would say we should turn it down. It gets taken to the OLT because it's a subdivision, probably costs, I don't know, a couple $100,000 combined. And with the new OLT rules, whoever loses pays the bill. And I think we have to be cognizant of that when we're making very hard decisions. And we just had it last meeting. And I think it's very important. I brought up something on a planning matter and said, why are we approving something before we get the reports? And I was told, and I think everybody on council voted against me when I said we should make people have reports up front. Well, we won't worry about that now. Maybe for new ones, we'll worry about that. Yet here we are looking at this saying, well, maybe we're going to send it back and, you know, not vote on and defer it for not a first time, not a second time, but a third time, when we didn't do it for somebody last council meeting when they had no reports. And we just put it through, say, don't worry, we'll deal with it later. But for somebody that's already come and we've asked for stuff, I think it's wrong that we take different approaches for different applicants. And I think the big thing here is this application was deemed complete by the planning boards. We have to make decisions on the information that is in front of us. It might not be an easy decision, might be a very hard decision, but it was deemed complete. So we have to look at that. And I know it's not an easy decision for people, but from what I see, again, I do agree that maybe that lot number 2 might not be the ideal building conditions. But if whoever buys it can't satisfy the requirements to build at 229, they're not going to get a building permit. And that's going to be whatever happens when the applicant, if he gets his lots, decides to sell it. And that's not a reason for us to say no, because somebody in a purchase and sale might forget to look at something.
Okay, thank you. Can I just point out to you that condition 1 says that this approval applies to the draft plan provided by the surveyor, dated as amended, which shows 8 single detached seasonal residential lots. So we're gonna zone them. That's how they're gonna be zoned. So to say, I mean, I wish if I could believe what Councillor Nash just said, I would say, yeah, that's not a problem, but if you zone something for a residential lot, there is an implication, and it's implicit that you can build on it.
Mr.
And so
Mayor.
I don't, so I don't, the other thing I want to point out is that, you know, you're absolutely right. There are 5 classes of septic systems, a couple of which might be applicable in this case. But a privy cannot be below the flood. If you look at them, class 1 is a privy, right? Can't be below the floodplain. Can't be. And if you look at something like an incinerating toilet or a composting toilet, which people have, what do you do with the gray water? Well, you got it. Then you start looking at what the requirements are for disposal of that, right? So it turns out that it's not as easy. And I'm not saying that there aren't maybe some creative solutions to some of these. I'm not trying to. I'm just concerned about that situation that we may discover that some of it is not. Now, I don't know. I wish there was an easy way to solve this, but I don't know. Councillor Lamb was suggesting that we could write some clause or other, but I don't know what you were thinking. And
Well, my only.
we don't have our planner back, I'm assuming. Am I right?
Could I just
He's gone to bed, I guess.
finish my comment I was saying earlier?
Hmm?
I know I was saying a comment earlier and then you replied to me. So I just wanted to finish off. You'd said that item 1 notes single detached seasonal residential lots. We could put it to WF like waterfront. But I will point out in our zoning bylaw, we probably have hundreds of lots that are zoned RR. And you can't build on them unless there's a road to them. Yet they're still set as RR. So just because.
Well, we're not going to zone it RR.
No, but my point is you're saying because it says 8 single detached seasonal residents, that therefore it must be allowed to be built on. We could just change it to which shows 8 WF lots. That's it. Just like we would in hundreds of lots, probably in our municipality that just say RR. Yet if there is no road to them, you could never build on them. So there's an easy way to get around that by simply just amending it to say, which shows 8 single detached seasonal residential lots and putting, which shows 8
WF2, is that what you're saying?
I just say WF lots, because I'm not sure what if they're
Well, there's two-
WF1 or 2 or.
Yeah.
So WF2.
They're WF2, they would
Yeah.
be.
And that would take out the wording, single detached seasonal residential lots.
Well, I don't know. I wish John was still here because he just to confirm whether or not that would that would address the concern that I have. You know, in case somehow or other this doesn't plow.
And just in closing, it's the last comment I'll make tonight. I do think we owe it to everybody in the audience. It's been here for hours tonight and put in a lot of time in their reports, and the applicants has put in a lot of time, not once, not twice, but 3 times, that a decision is made today. I think we owe that to the municipality, to every single person in the audience tonight, everybody on the phone call, that we need to move forward.
So what's the suggested change in number 1?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would have just changed where it says as amended, which shows 8 single detached seasonal residential lots to which shows 8 WF2 lots. So take out the word single detached seasonal.
And I heard you, Mr. Mayor, say that satisfies your concerns. Is that
I
what I heard you say.
The problem is I don't know for sure if it does or if it actually changes anything. I mean, we'd have to.
Well, don't forget,
Yeah.
these are recommendations to the planning, right?
Well, I know, but
We're not, that's what it is.
Yeah.
We're not the decision maker, we're the inputter to the planning board, so if between now and the planning board meeting on the 27th, for some reason, WF2 was inappropriate, that can always be changed at the planning board. Right?
Well,
Yeah, we can change it.
I guess it could.
Well, it will. I'm chairing the meeting. I said, I'm chairing the meeting. I'll make sure it is.
But you're trying to get at the question of whether, yeah. Just
I'm just
whether.
going at what you said. You said that satisfies you, and you know, if it does, it satisfies me.
You have two lots. Well, I don't know. Yeah, look, I'm not interested in holding the process up. I'm expressing my reservations that I have that are that I wish could be resolved in some other way. If you want to make a decision tonight, I don't know how we can do that. So I don't know how you're going to satisfy me, but we'll if there are others who want to comment, I'll let you.
It's 10:35. We're way past curfew. Let's vote on it and make a decision either way. That's what everybody that has been dealing with this deserves. Whether it's yes or no is what it is. Let's make a decision.
Okay. Is that the wish of them? All right, I will call the question, or I'll actually I will ask the clerk to call the question for recorded vote.
Thank you, Councillor Bray.
Yes.
Councillor Lamb.
Yes.
Councillor Nash.
Yes.
Councillor Woods.
Yes.
Mayor Comrie.
No.
Thank you. That motion carries.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, we are at our curfew, and I know that Councillor Lamb wanted to bring up some more comments on.
No, I don't have time.
But we can pick this up later on, I think. At another meeting.
Yep.
We can. Oh, where is that? Oh, yeah. All right, folks, we just have a couple of housekeeping items to do, and I'm sorry, I apologize, but if you could just keep it down for a minute, we're going to try and finish this. We do have the deeming bylaw that I think was not controversial with respect to the Bennett property. Could I get a mover and seconder, please, that bylaw number 15-2023, being a bylaw to deem lot 9 in the municipality of Whitestone not to be a lot within plan of subdivision 42M-628, be read a first and second time this 21st day of February 2023, and further read a third time, passed and properly signed and sealed this 21st day of February 2023 and numbered 15-2023. Councillor Bray moves. I think I saw Councillor Woods' hand go up. All those in favor of that bylaw? Okay, I think that's carried. All right, so we've got that one. I'll leave this one sitting for a moment. We can dispense with correspondence, I think, for the next meeting. There's not very much there. Confirming bylaw, please.
The correspondence, I just want to make sure that on the hydro one, that we notify the MPA, right?
Yes.
That they're gonna do sprays and cut down trees and whatever on the way to Black Lake or out near them.
Then we notify who?
The Magneto and Pioneer.
Oh, okay,
Association.
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
MPA.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said MTA and I.
MPA. I just,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the
just. so
subway
they
system
know.
in Boston.
Or
Yeah.
Send them a copy of the letter. or
Okay,
something
yeah,
like
sure,
that.
sure. Good idea. Thank you. Is there anything else on correspondence you want?
No, but I had several councillor items, which I know we won't get to. But I did have one, if I could ask, it'll take 5 seconds.
Okay, and that's. Go ahead.
It's a real quick one. I was just wondering if you are a member of the Lake Washkesh Association.
Well, initial reaction is that's none of your. But no, I'm not actually. No. You know, are you a member of the Gooseneck Association?
No, I said I resigned from it when I became a council member. So that's why I was wondering. I made it public. I wasn't afraid. Anyways, I made it public and I said it, I think, 2 council meetings ago.
Okay, well. That's all right. Correspondence. What item of correspondence was that, Michelle? Was it A or B? Let's notify MPA of rain, okay. All right. We got that one. I have to do this. And now, how about the confirmatory bylaws here? Councillor Woods is moving. And Councillor Nash is. All those in favor, please indicate. And adjournment. Councillor Woods. Well, Councillor Lamb wants it. He wants to second it. So we're at 10:39. Until this coming Saturday, folks. 10 o'clock, we decided to give people a chance to sleep in.